Okay, I'd like to call to order the June 21st, 2011 meeting of the Placer County Board of Supervisors, and we will start with a flag salute led by Tom Miller.
Yes, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anne, if you would read our meeting procedures, please.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of June 21st, 2011. Agendas are available on the wall outside this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has the discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thanks, Anne. Next is time for public comment. This is a time when anyone can address the board on something that is not on the agenda, keeping in mind that we can take no action on that item. So if someone would like to address the board under public comment, please come forward and state your name.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Supervisor. I'm Delta Wilson Rickey, and I'm here to talk about I thought I was prepared. Obviously, I'm not. So you're going to get tears and all. Excuse me. This is my 6-pound rescue dog that I had for 10 months that was murdered in my arms just a little bit over 2 weeks ago. Gus Thompson in the Auburn Journal said it best. He interviewed me yesterday. I feel like I've had a murdered child. I was walking my dog on a leash in my own community, little community that was in the middle of the 49er fire. Thank you, Jennifer, for being so supportive, and Jim, always. Thank you for being my friend. I had, about 2 o'clock, I had made my usual loop that I do twice a day. I was in front of my house, just across the street, and just across from a county park that has a nice big public sign, Placer County Leash Law. I know you've both seen it, and I'm sure anybody that's was out at the 49er fire saw that, because the park, we were blessed that our house was saved. And this is just a kind of a side note that 3 weeks before the fire, we lost another little dog, not to a pit bull, but a year ahead of that, if it hadn't been for the fast thinking of a young man in our neighborhood, I'd have been killed along with my little Doxy. I was coming out of the park with my dog on a leash. There was a pit bull that happens to be 2 doors from my home, and he was on a dead run with his young owner right on his heels. This is all public record. This time it went to court. The only thing that saved me and the dog at that time was the fact that this quick-thinking young man drove his pickup between me and the dog and jumped out of the car, and if I hadn't have yelled and screamed and told him, don't kill him, don't kill him, he was going to kill not only the owner and the dog. And believe me, there was other people. This was witnessed by a lot of people. And at the time, I went to the court with a highway patrolman, with a wonderful officer from the animal control, and a community full of friends and neighbors. That dog today, that dog got a $2,000 fine, is supposed to be confined to its regulation. I'm losing my words here because I'm getting a little flustered, but there are regulation cages. That dog was ordered out of our neighborhood, always on a leash. That dog is still a menace in another part of town, I believe downtown Auburn. I was told by an official, I'm not going to name who that official was, that dog is still a menace, still creating a problem with the animal control. And I think that's enough on that story, because I want to talk a little bit about Lucky. Mainly, I guess what I want to say is that what I would really like to see, and this is no pun intended, some teeth put in the leash law, and the power for our officials, the officials that are in charge of the animal control, and I can name the 2 officers that are so totally compassionate and so totally supportive, but I will leave that to another time. But I would like to see them empowered to do, number 1, chip the dog, vicious dog. I'm not picking on pits. I'm picking on vicious dogs. I'm doing this for my town, my county, my state. It's being taken away from us. I'm a senior citizen and I'm not safe in my own community. This attack on me that would have killed me had I not been embracing my little dog across my throat and across my heart in this position. I do not know how I got her there. She was on a leash. The attack was so vicious that pit bull literally buried its teeth in the back of my dog right here, right here. The owner of the dog had to literally pry its teeth apart to release me. I am 76 years old. I was, by the power of and I'm like a little over 120 pounds, soaking wet. I was thrown back into the bushes with a thrust that had not, the angels, my good creator, was looking after me. I would either be dead or at best, anyway. I will finish right quickly. Chip the dog, first offense. Require a muzzle and a leash on the dog. And the leash be that, not just a leash, but a choke chain. And I'll close by saying that that two-strike law is absolutely ridiculous. Thank you, supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on something not on the agenda? Please come forward, state your name.
My name is Tom Rickey. I'm Delta's husband. We were shocked when we reported this incident to the animal control to learn that the state law requires that a dog attack, that the dog be given a second chance before action can be taken. In this case, what we had was obviously a ferocious pit bull. It wasn't attempting to get in a dog fight, wasn't attempting to dominate this little 6-pound toy poodle. It obviously intended to kill it. The pit bull breed is, as you probably know, is bred to fight in dog fights and to kill in dog fights, and people have been trying to deal with that for years. But in this particular case, this pit bull was only about a year old. It was a very young dog, but obviously with a propensity to kill. He was over in the North Park, the little 2-acre park there across the street from us. He was in North Park with his owner, his owner's wife, and their 2 small children, ages 2 and 4, I believe, little kids. They had turned him loose so he could run in the park off of his leash. He ran instead across the street and attacked Delta and Lucky, as she's described to you. I think we need a very firm Placer County ordinance about dog attacks and the care of dogs that have shown a propensity to attack. This one was obviously ferocious. As far as I know, animal control won't do a thing in this particular case because the Delta wasn't bit. So that didn't fit that paragraph. The only death was another animal, which was our dog Lucky. So they feel they're hamstrung at animal control because of the nature of the state statute and the follow-up to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board on something that's not on the agenda today? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to Supervisor Committee reports. But first, I'd like to start by we're going to adjourn today in honor of Earl Corrin, our Treasurer Tax Collector for over 30 years, and Janine, our current Treasurer Tax Collector, served with him. And so, Janine, if you'd like to make a few comments.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's with sorrow that I come before you today to report the passing of former Treasurer Tax Collector Earl Corrin this past July 12th. He was born in 1925 in Southern California, Hollywood. He would have been 86 on July 10th. He, as I said, he was a Southern California boy, and he attended both USC and UCLA, for those of you who carry that rivalry. But I think one of the interesting claims to that is that he played basketball for John Wooden in John Wooden's first year of coaching. He was president of his student body in high school at Marshall High School, which is a famous high school in Southern California. It's been the set for many movies. He was also a Navyman. He served as a radarman in the South Pacific during World War II from 1943 to 1946. He has a long history of public service, not just as treasurer tax collector, but serving for the County Treasurer Tax Collectors Association as president, the County Treasurers Association, and the National Association of Treasurers and Finance Officers. His public service has been honored by former Vice President Hubert Humphrey, presidential candidate Richard Nixon, President Ronald Reagan, and Governor Pete Wilson. He also has served in many capacities in charitable organizations here in the county and also in the state. And he was honored by the Auburn Rotary Club as a Paul Harris Fellow. For those of you who remember him, he always had a story or a joke to tell. He always spoke very fondly of his family in the office. He was very proud of his grandchildren from the time they were very small, relaying little stories and how cute they were to as they got older, their academic and athletic accomplishments, and then their professional and civic accomplishments as they're all adults now. There was a memorial service for him last Saturday, and I feel very fortunate that I worked for him for about 6.5 years. One of the things I learned from him was how to understand state law in terms of how that affected public policy and ultimately how it affected the people. That's what he used to always say in the office. How will this affect the people? And that was always foremost in his mind. With that, I'm going to end with one of his favorite quotes, which was by John Wooden. We're all absolutely equal in having the opportunity to make the most of what we have.
Thanks, Janine. Appreciate it. Are there any other supervisor reports, committee reports? Jennifer.
I actually, I think I took the trifecta. I had a number of committee and commission meetings that I just wanted to report on very quickly. We had an air pollution control district meeting where the topic probably of most interest, in addition to adopting the yearly budget, was there was a concern raised by some of the cities, primarily Roseville, about the per capita fee charged by the Air Pollution Control District. The board did have a pretty robust discussion about that. There were letters in support from all the cities, I think with the exception of Auburn, to roll that fee back. But upon discussion of the board, it was a vote to have the fee remain where it is, with the exception of the Roseville representative who did vote to support the rollback of the fee. The upshot of that is that per capita fee will be remaining at 50 cents per person. We did have an economic development board meeting in Tahoe at the Grand Labacan Resort. Very well attended. We had a number of presentations, one from the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association on their plans for the coming year. We met their new executive director, Sandy Hall, who's just a spark plug. I mean, she is just going to be amazing for that organization. We had a report from Peter Kratz on the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project and what's moving forward on that project. Brian Helm from Boulder Bay, which is actually in Nevada, but about 30 feet away from the county of Placer, so of some fair import to us, came and gave a presentation on just the process and how difficult it can be, not just getting through the actual permitting process in Tahoe, but then actually raising funds to put these projects forward. So it was a really interesting from the economic development perspective. Also had a report on the Amgen race and the economic benefits that we did see, even though the first two legs of that race in Tahoe were canceled due to snow. And then we also had a very brief but informative presentation on what's happening with the existing fire station in Tahoe City, Station 51, which will be replaced later this fall with a new station also in Tahoe City. But the county owns the ground under the old fire station. It's immediately adjacent to Commons Beach. And so the question is going out to the community, and obviously since the county has ownership of that land, will be part of this discussion. What happens with the old site? You know, what can we do to trigger some economic development in that area? Does Does the building remain and get repurposed to something different? Does it get torn down? What happens there? So that was a very jam-packed meeting with a lot of particularly interesting subjects on it. Yesterday I took part in an American River Authority meeting by phone. I was unable to make the meeting in person in El Dorado. Probably the most important thing that came out of that meeting is that there does seem to be a movement by some of the ARA board members in support of Congressman McClintock's desire to build the Auburn Dam. So that will obviously be a discussion point for that board, and probably a discussion point I would think that would need to come in front of our board to determine county policy on that. Off the topic of committees, the one thing that I really did want to take the opportunity to do today was to let anyone who does not know that Pat Malberg, my district aide, will be retiring on Friday. She has been with me for 2 years. She's probably listening and being horrified back in her office right now. She's been absolutely phenomenal. Tom Dwelly at the Meddlers meeting this morning said to me, she's the best employee Placer County's ever had, and that's high praise if you know Tom Dwelly. So, Pat, you're the best employee Placer County's ever had, and I will miss you. And for the last 2 years, says Joe. Yeah. But I will miss her dearly. She's been great. She's been just a terrific asset to Placer County. She's done just phenomenal community outreach, and just thank you, Pat, for your 2 years of service.
And Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You probably didn't miss me at the last board meeting, but I was in the nation's capital on behalf of the Placer County Air Pollution Control District to receive a Clean Air Excellence Award from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I was accompanied by Tom Kristoff, our Air Pollution Control Officer, Dan Giron, the Deputy Regional Forester for the Southwest Pacific Region, and George Emerson, the COO of Sierra Pacific Industries. The award ceremony was rather anticlimactic. It was at 4:30 in the afternoon. Early Tuesday morning, we met with Rich Gold and Mike Galano from Holland Knight, our legislative advocates in D.C., and gave them a briefing about what was going on with our biomass project in the Tahoe region. Rich tried to set up a meeting with Senator Feinstein's office later that day, but we couldn't squeeze it in with the other meetings we had. We met with the Deputy Undersecretary of Agriculture, Doug Crandall, and his staff gave him a full report on our biomass project. It was greeted with great enthusiasm. Secretary Crandall thought that maybe we should give a presentation to the Secretary of Agriculture. Later that afternoon, we met with the Woody Biomass Working Group and gave a presentation about what was going on in the Tahoe region with our biomass project. They were very encouraged because they actually see things getting done. And I have to give credit to Brett Story, our program manager, for helping move forward with that, and with Tom Kristoff, Air Pollution Control Officer. So it was very rewarding to go back there, and I felt honored to be able to receive that award on behalf of the Air Pollution Control District. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jim. And for the record, during a break and off camera, all of us commented about how much we missed you at the last meeting. Just wanted to make sure.
You, my sense of humor, I imagine.
Among other things.
It wasn't caught on tape, sorry.
And Kirk, do you have anything? Okay, next is consent agenda, and we have one item to consider adding to consent. And you all have that, item 19. It's accommodation to Dr. Leo Chavez, who's been the president of Sierra College, but we are trying to add this late because turns out Leo's actually going to Dubai to run a university over there, and will be out of the country by the time we meet after our next meeting. So if it's acceptable to my colleagues, if somebody could.
I move approval of the item to be added to the agenda.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to add the item just discussed to consent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then we have one item to pull, Tom.
Yes, that'd be item, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, item 22B, which is a final map for the Gondola Heights subdivision we're just asking that it be withdrawn, probably be re-agended someday in the future.
Okay, so with that, the consent agenda is a list of motions intended to be considered all in one vote, but the board would be happy to pull any item if any of my colleagues desire that, or someone from the public would like something to be pulled and discussed individually. Seeing none, we'll entertain.
Chair, I move approval of the remaining items.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve consent, and roll call, please.
Holmes,
Yes.
Euler, Montgomery,
Yes.
Weigand.
Yes. Thank you. So with that, we will move to our first department item, which is item 12, administrative services, blanket purchase order, disposable food trays, probation kitchen. Jim.
Good morning. Jim Bogan, Purchasing Manager.
Good morning.
And Renee Harvey, Probation's Food Service Manager. As you said, item 12A is requesting your board's approval to award a blanket purchase order as a result of a new competitively bid cooperative purchasing agreement by San Diego County. The agreement is with Allen Packaging Company of Tustin, California for disposable food trays for Probation Central Kitchen. Allen Packaging has been our supplier for the past 4 years under a previous San Diego contract. Probation has been very satisfied with Allen's products. Pricing under the new contract, this newly bid contract, is about 5% higher than last year, matching a corresponding increase in the producer price index for pulp paper products. Staff recommends your approval to award Probation's disposable food tray blanket purchase order to Allen Packaging in the maximum amount of $300,000. Be happy to answer any questions.
Jennifer.
I believe I asked this last year, and I'm going to ask it again. Are these trays recyclable, and are they being recycled?
They are recyclable. The disposable company cannot, because there's food product in them, cannot use them as a mulch, which is what we had hoped for, but they are using them because it does help break down the landfill a lot faster. They break down in 30 days, and they are made from recycled milk cartons.
Okay, so they are technically recyclable, but not actually being recycled at this point?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone from the public wish to address the board on this item? See none, pleasure of the board.
Move approval of the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the purchase item just discussed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our next department item is a presentation on the state budget by Graham Knauth. So we're going to learn what the latest and the greatest is from the state of California, such as it is.
Yes, well, it's amazing how you can make progress and still stand still. The given
Not getting knocked backward is progress.
it is progress, yeah, that's true. Graham Knauth, Finance and Budget Operations Manager. I'll provide a very quick update relative to what's happening with the state budget. I stand before you as a representative of what I would describe as the ongoing vacillation between clarity, a twisted definition of clarity, and complete confusion related to the 11-12 state budget. So we've approved a few different, or I should say the state folks have approved a few different versions of the budget. As it stands, the governor's taken some action to hold some of those in place and to veto other elements, and we still don't have a final framework. If you recall back in March, there was $11 billion in solutions, primarily cuts that were approved and signed by the governor. That included a public safety realignment without funding, and so there was delayed implementation. There was no action related to either eliminating or modifying redevelopment agencies. So last week, following stalled negotiations between the governor and Republicans, the Democrats approved a budget package on a majority vote basis, and they included some new revenues as part of that package, revenues from higher projections, that's a good thing, and revenues from several other places, instituting a quarter-cent sales tax increase, which would actually rebase our Bradley Burns local tax rate back to the 1%. Back to the 1% level. They imposed a vehicle registration fee of $12, which would create about $300 million that they would direct towards public safety to offset the expiring vehicle license fee revenue. That gets you about 2/3 of the way there related to that. And they included a 2-bill package related to redevelopment agencies that first would eliminate redevelopment agencies with much like what we've talked about over the last several months, where there'd be an elimination and the portion that would remain would deal with the bonded debt and the contractual obligations. And then they created a second bill which basically said, if you give us money, we will not eliminate you. And which was intended to be sort of a bridge between the dozen or so proposals that we've discussed that go from a voluntary contribution from redevelopment agencies to the state to a full-sale elimination. They also included a shifting of the mental health services for special education students mandate from counties to schools, so that was formally included in that package. And there are two different pieces in terms of where we're at. Element number one, the budget bills that actually went to the governor's desk were vetoed within 24 hours. So as a whole, the package, well, there really isn't a package as a whole, given that the governor vetoed that so quickly. Second, all of the implementing trailer bills that include the mandate shift from counties to schools, the redevelopment pieces, the vehicle registration fee, all of those elements, and a fire protection fee dealing with imposing an up to $150 fee in, on structures in state responsibility areas. Those are all in bills that are now in what I would describe as legislative limbo. They've been approved, but they have not been sent to the governor. The legislature is holding on to them, and that allows the clock not to tick. It would be akin to simply pulling the battery out of that clock and saying it's 9 o'clock all day long, and then when there's clarity about exactly what's going to happen and the votes are there, put the battery back in and the clock will start again. And in this case, the governor has there's a 12-day clock on bills that actually get to the governor's desk, and the legislature wants they want to keep that clock from ticking. So now the governor continues to negotiate with the Republicans on the same issues that we've been talking about: spending cap, regulation reform, pension reform, and tax extensions. And he may be hopeful. I'm not sure how hopeful other folks are, either Democrats or Republicans in the legislature. And the start of the fiscal year is right around the corner. We're within 2 weeks of starting the fiscal year with a number of reductions in place, but without a full-scale legislative framework. I guess my final comment would be related to Proposition 25. And if you recall, back in November, Proposition 25 was the majority vote budget, so long as the legislature met the time frame, and to the extent that they didn't meet the time frame in terms of passing something by June 15th, and they would forfeit their pay permanently on a going forward basis. That's currently the big political hot potato that's sitting in the hands of the state controller. And today or tomorrow, he will likely make some sort of determination as to whether or not the legislature did approve a budget, what he would deem as a balanced budget, to enable them to continue to receive compensation as they negotiate. Significant political issue, certainly in the Capitol, and one that actually could have some impact in terms of how negotiations play out over the next days, weeks, or months, whatever it might be, relative to the state. And I'll stop there and take any questions you might have.
Any questions by board members? I don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Let's do item 13B, also employees. Therese? Notice to layoff, notices classifications as delineated in Exhibit 1.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Therese Leonard with the County Executive Office. I'm here today to give you an information update on the layoff process that we've been going through for the last couple of months. As you're aware, we've been going through a series of years where we've been having economic decline across the nation, in the state, and at the local level. This has seriously affected county revenues, and we have been in a pullback mode in terms of our budget for the last at least 3 years in response to that. Essentially, over the last number of years, the last 3 years, we have implemented a number of labor adjustments in the county to help us meet within budget constraints and our revenue projections. Some of those have been to allow for mandatory time off days, voluntary time off as well for the PPO represented. We have done some cost sharing in health insurance and pension plans with our employees, and we have done a minimum number of layoffs, 17 for our county workforce, which is low in the regional area, and I have included an attachment in your package to reflect that. Of the 17, one employee actually was able to return to work in a different position for which she went through a recruitment process, because we allowed through our layoff impact discussions the ability to do promotional recruitments, which are internal to our county. Back in early April, your board delegated layoff authority to our county executive officer, because through the budget process we have recognized that we have need for additional reductions in our labor unit, predominantly related to workload, but also because of funding constraints. Since that time, the county has been in active labor negotiations with our Placer Public Employees Organization, also referred to as PPEO, for layoff impact related to layoffs for fiscal year 11-12. We have not reached resolution with our union, so we are going to continue those discussions into the future pending layoff impact agreement, and then those will be coming back to your board for approval. Today, we are here to represent phase 1 of the layoff impacts. We are going to have to approach layoffs this year in a phased approach, and the reason for that is because there's so much uncertainty, as Graham just reflected, at the state level. Phase 1 has to do with internal need as well as state budget. We are proposing to issue 6 layoff notices this week, one to the Community Development Resource Agency, Engineering and Surveying Department for a engineering tech due to lack of funds, and the other 5 are for the Child Support Services Department. That has to do strictly with the state and what they are allowing to be funded into the future. You may recall that back in 2007-8, the state was required to go to an automated fiscal system statewide, and through that process we have transitioned the majority of our accounting functions in child support to the Bank of America, where they're actually doing the processing of these transactions, inflow and outflow. Prior to the transition, we needed 8 fiscal staff to handle that workload. We currently have 8 fiscal staff in child support services. We only need 3 to manage the internal workload. And because the state is saying we need you to redirect your dollars that we pay you towards caseload growth in your services, we strongly suggest and advise that you shift these people either into those functions or lay them off and have the work done by other people, because you need child support services practitioners. So to that mandate, we are asking, or actually we are going to be issuing layoff notices to 5 child support specialists. What I would say is within the 6, 2 of them have bump back rights that if they choose to exercise could be placed back into what we know are vacant and funded positions. So at least 2 of the 6 have a right to another job because they held previous service with the county, and that is as written in Chapter 3 of our Civil Service Protection. 4 of the other allocations are very widespread throughout our county. The opportunities for those people, if they choose to apply for positions in the county, are very good because they are generic across the county and transferable. If we are successful with layoff impact discussions, hopefully they'd be able to apply for promotional recruitments as has our past employees. The second phase, which is not being brought to you today because it's tied to other activities, is probably going to be presented to your board at your next meeting on July 12th, and it has to do predominantly with Health and Human Services and the Placer Office of Education contract that Graham actually referenced in his presentation, because the state is now directing special emotionally disturbed funding to the schools as opposed to the counties. The PCOE has an opportunity to do that work within their organization. However, we have been in contract discussions with them for the last several months to continue through the county to provide those services and get reimbursed through PCOE. Those contract discussions are ongoing, and so we would like a little more time to continue them with the hope that we can reach agreement and not have to lay off these employees. We're talking about 10 employees. The other phase 2, it has to do with the redevelopment agency. And as Graham alluded to, we're kind of going through a whiplash with the state budget. One thing is for sure, something is going to happen with redevelopment agencies. That seems the focus of the legislature as well as the governor. What we don't know is exactly what that will look like. What we're pretty sure of is that it will be a transition for our current redevelopment agency, and that over the next year, while they may have to lose some of the 12 positions that they have right now, it will probably be a phased approach as well, and that the majority of that group will probably continue for a while to transition to whatever the state evolves to. The third phase of this transition is really the big unknown, and it has predominantly to do with when you finally adopt a budget, what is that going to look like for the county in terms of moving responsibility areas and what kind of funding comes with that and what the county's going to need to do to flex and adjust to that. And that would be coming at a later date, probably not till close to November or December. I have high hopes that the budget will be adopted in September, well after the due date. So today we just wanted to give you advance notice that we are going to issue 6 layoff notices today. If we did not issue those notices, because the funding is not currently in the budget for 11-12, it would be at a new cost to the county of about $436,000. So that's our information report, and I'd be happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Thanks, Therese. Questions, board members? Jennifer.
Thank you, Therese. Very informative, and I'm glad to hear at least currently it's just 6 that we're looking at with 2 bump backs. One of the notes in our packet says that in keeping with the state's previous direction, this is related to child support services, over the last year the department initiated 3 promotional recruitments for child support specialists in an effort to encourage their staff to transition to a new platform. Unfortunately, these recruits were unsuccessful, and as a result 5 fiscal staffs are being recommended for layoff. Of those 5, are 3 of them the 3 who were unsuccessful?
To be honest with you, Supervisor Montgomery, of the 5, only 1 applied, and that employee was offered a position and declined it, and so the recruitment was not successful. For several years now, the accounting folks across the state in child support departments have been informed that they were going to wrench down that area, but that was unsuccessful, and so we're moving forward with another recruitment that we'd like to coincide with this noticing to give them one more opportunity to apply for positions in the Child Support Services Department.
Okay. And then in terms of the fiscal impact, I just think it's important to note, as is in our packet here, that the county will not achieve any budget savings with these layoffs. as funding for the positions were not included in the 2011-2012 proposed budget, or that funding has already been redirected within that budget to other position allocations. Is there any implication at all fiscally to the two bump backs, or is that just a neutral?
It would be neutral to the county because the positions that the two bump backs would go into are currently vacant and funded in next year's budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public who would like to address this item? Seeing none, thank you. Therese, we'll move on to, I'm sorry.
Just one more thing. I want to call out on Exhibit 1. The total at the bottom of that sheet is incorrect. It should be 6 and not 16.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's on page 204. So we'll now move to our 205 timed item, which is a presentation by the light.
9:05.
Excuse me, 205, 905.
Who cares?
Numbers. Thanks.
Really late or really early.
Recently had a birthday inside, just, you know. Our 905 timed item, which is a presentation from the Lighthouse Family Counseling Center. Angela Ponifus is the executive director, and she's accompanied by Fred Acuri, the current chair of the board.
I thought we could watch the slideshow if it's available.
Yep.
Greg?
Greg, slideshow, please. See how well that works?
Slow magic, not like
Here we go.
you have to push the clicker to advance it if you want to have it.
Me? Is it for me to do? Oh.
Yeah, it's fine.
Such a good smile.
Okay, are we just going
Rating the state, I like it.
What are you?
Oh my.
Okay. Come on, man. Can we bring cards?
There. That figures.
Well, aside from the technical errors, I want to personally thank each of you for your most recent support of our signature fundraiser, the Celebrity Waiter Luncheon, held on April 8th. This is the 5th year in which the Board of Supervisors has supported our signature event, and we are very grateful. With your help, we had our most successful event to date and raised $50,000 in gross earnings. Who would have thought that a small agency in Lincoln, California could raise $50,000, but we did it with your help. We are humbled by your support and the support of all of the community leaders who joined together to embrace our cause. The Lighthouse has calculated that it cost us approximately $300 to meet an individual's needs, with the average person coming into our office 10 times to receive services. Therefore, with your help, we will be able to provide counseling services, educational classes, and resource help to 135 people and 1,350 visits to our office. I have been with the Lighthouse for 4 years, and it's so wonderful to see the Lighthouse improve its efficiencies, professionalism, and impact on the community at large. To a great extent, our growth is due to you. Year after year, you demonstrate your belief and trust in us as a community partner and service provider. I am so proud to be a part of the Placer model, and may I say, it works. The Placer model empowers community organizations such as the Lighthouse to provide easily accessible, culturally appropriate, community-based health and wellness services. One program in which we see the Placer model effectively at work is the Differential Response Program. Lighthouse engages 79% of at-risk families referred to us from the children's system of care, and 100% of the families engaged utilize our counseling services. We know this program is stabilizing our most at-risk families in Placer County, and in collaboration with other local family resource centers, we save 1,716 children each year from entering into the foster care system, with 97.3% of children not having a resubstantiated case of child abuse and neglect within 18 months of referral to a family resource center. This work keeps families intact and improves overall family functioning, while saving the county and taxpayers millions of dollars. As a previous CPS worker myself, it is so good to be on the side of prevention services. Thank you for having the vision and foresight to institute this program in Placer County. And on behalf of the Lighthouse staff, thank you for the opportunity to partner with you in making a difference in Placer County. And now I'd like to introduce to you the chair of our board of directors, Mr. Fred Arcuri.
Thank you, Angela.
Look awfully relaxed now that you're retired, Mr. Arcuri.
Yes, it is. It is nice. This is the first time I've worn long pants in months. I just wanted to come in this morning and personally thank all of you for your support. We raised $50,000, and to put that in context, we raised $50,000 at lunch. And we did that because all of you were willing to come and wear a funny little apron and a hat and shake hands and help us bring people in. And this was my second year as a board member. I've been to all 5 of the events over the years, and at the end of this event, I have literally received dozens of emails and phone calls and comments for continued support of people who were there at the Lighthouse. So I'm sure that next year we'll do as well, if not better than we did this year. So thank you for that. As a lifelong Placer County resident and a 12-year resident of the Lincoln area, I want to thank you also for recognizing the need that's there in that community and helping us find ways to service that need. Yesterday at our annual or our monthly meeting, we approved our 2011-2012 budget. We have significant increases in expenses and in fundraising, and I'm very confident with the board that we have, and actually a waiting list of members to be on this board, that we will continue to see the Lighthouse not only survive but thrive and continue to grow and provide these services. So thank you all very, very much for your support.
Thanks, Fred. And thanks to you, Fred and Angela, for all the good work you do. Fred, by the way, is recently retired Chief Operating Officer of Sure West, which is why he looks so relaxed. But thanks for taking the time to serve on the board. So as a member of the Lincoln community, this is very significant and important to me, and I appreciate my colleagues being willing to. I was just kind of thinking, speaking of counseling, with our pay, not that I'm complaining, maybe you could help us with jobs in restaurants if we could borrow those outfits and kind of.
You know, you were recognized for the position you hold, not for the service you provide.
So like, I've known Fred almost like all my life, and I should have known not to give him an opportunity to. But thank you very much. We will now move to our 9:10 item, which is a presentation by Supervisor Montgomery regarding a resolution for California Winter Games.
Thank you, and I'd actually like to thank Supervisor Euler's office. Supervisor Euler's office was contacted for this and realized partway through the process that, oh wait, Tahoe's in Montgomery's district, isn't it? So thank you for turning this over to me. Is there someone here today who's going to be accepting this resolution, or shall I just read it? Seeing no one, I will just read it. In the matter of a resolution in support of the California Winter Games Committee to pursue the opportunity to host the Winter Olympic Games in the Lake Tahoe region and proclaim June 23, 2011 as International Olympic Day in Placer County. Whereas the California Winter Games Committee is a nonprofit organization comprised of leaders from the business community, political arena, and nonprofit and non-governmental organizations whose mission is to explore hosting future Winter Olympic Games in the Lake Tahoe region, and whereas the United States Olympic Committee may solicit as early as next year for the 2022 Winter Games bid process, and whereas the committee will explore how to best position the state for a bid to host the Winter Games, and whereas competing for a host city Winter Olympics bid will be a valuable endeavor for California and for the Sacramento region that will bring together our communities to highlight our state and region's best assets on the world stage, and whereas the California Winter Games Committee will work closely alongside Nevada's Reno Tahoe Winter Games Coalition to promote both states' individual and combined interests in future Winter Olympic Games, and whereas Olympics in Tahoe are expected to bring regional economic benefits based on the data showing that the Salt Lake City 2002 Winter Olympic Games brought $76 million to state and local government, created 35,000 jobs, and brought $1.5 billion in labor income. And whereas the Tahoe region is equipped to host the Winter Games with a world-class ski resorts, desirable accommodations, and the recognized ability of the U.S. to host a very successful Olympic Games, and whereas early public opinion polling commissioned by the California Winter Games Committee shows California residents overwhelmingly support California leaders pursuing the Winter Olympic Games in the Lake Tahoe region, and 95% of Californians believe hosting the Games would have a positive impact on the economy overall. And whereas hosting the Winter Olympic Games will enhance California's international image and will increase tourism interest as Olympic attendees will likely travel through Sacramento and other parts of California, taking advantage of the state's airports, wine country, museums, hospitality, scenery, and outdoor activities. And whereas the first Olympic Games appeared in Athens in the year 1896, well, technically not true, but that's okay. And whereas International Olympic Day was first celebrated on June 23, 1948, now therefore be it resolved that the Placer County Board of Supervisors commends and encourages the California Winter Games Committee to further pursue the opportunity to host the Winter Olympic Games in the Lake Tahoe region, and be it further resolved that the Placer County Board of Supervisors proclaims June 23, 2011 as International Olympic Day in Placer County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our 9:15 item now is a resolution by our sheriff, who's way in the back there, commending Bill Summers for 41 years of service as a Placer County sheriff employee. So, Ed.
Mr. Chairman, happy belated birthday.
Same to you.
How's that working out for us?
How old are you?
A week older than you.
Yes, we are.
I'm almost as old as many years as Bill has served the county. It's just it's a great opportunity, and we thank the board for the opportunity to commend Bill Summers for over 41 years of service to the county. And I look back on that time. First off, I've been waiting 37 and a half years to finally get seniority in that organization, so that has finally come. But I think that there's a lot of talk going on about public employees and this and that and the other thing. And I look at the guy with Bill, his work ethic, what he's provided this county over the years, and I'm just happy to tell the taxpayers and the community got a good return on investment with this guy. He has just been outstanding. Most recently, anchoring down our investigation services and actually doing a lot of teaching. And I like that. When you talk about the Placer County model, I like the idea that our employees go out and teach others throughout this state and nation how to do the job right, with integrity, with honor, and with years of service. So I would just like to turn the podium over to my good friend, Bill Summers, who may be the best employee Placer County's ever had, ever. So, Bill.
Well, I'm surprised. Thank you very much for this honor. I greatly appreciate it. It has been a pleasure to serve Placer County for the last 41 years. And I've, in my own way, as an investigator, as a deputy sheriff, I have touched some people's lives, some for the better, some for the worse. But I appreciate the time that the sheriff has been tolerant and patient with me over times. And I thank you for allowing me to be here today. This is quite an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. And Ed, and I actually have a resolution here that I'll bring down and use that for some photographs.
Thank you.
Turn around.
Okay.
We'll put you in the middle, and let's bracket you with two 60-year-old guys.
By the way, I'm older than both of them.
Thank you for that. And congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much.
And next, it is my pleasure to present a resolution to Kyle Gordy. So Kyle, if you'll come to the podium, please. But I also want to acknowledge a very relaxed-looking former colleague of mine, Rocky Rockholm, and his wife, Dorothy, the proud grandparents of Kyle. But Kyle, I'm going to read this resolution, and I'll come on down with the resolution, and then you can say a few words if you like. But Kyle was born in Roseville, third child of 7 children in his family, son of Linda and Jeff Sewig of Newcastle, grandson of Dorothy Rockholm and Rocky Rockholm. Kyle graduated from Lincoln High School in 2004, so it's obvious that such a high achiever is a Lincoln zebra. I graduated in 1969, Kyle. He attended the U.S. Military Preparatory School at Fort Mammoth, New Jersey. He then graduated from West Point in 2011 and finished in the top 5% of his class with a final class ranking of 140 out of 1,187 cadets. Kyle finished West Point with a GPA of 3.469, made the Dean's List every semester at the Academy. He also received the Superintendent's Award for Academic Excellence for achieving a GPA of 3.877 his junior year. He received academic awards from both the Department of Foreign Languages and Department of Social Service Sciences for academic excellence within the departments. He was chosen by his company tactical officer to be the company commander, the highest ranking cadet in the company during his senior year. Kyle has been awarded the Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Medal, Global War and Terrorism Service Medal, and the Army Service Ribbon. So Kyle, with that, it's my pleasure to present you this resolution.
I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's a great honor. I just want to thank my grandparents, especially for all the support through the years, and just thank you.
just want to mention that when I was in high school in Lincoln, Kyle is extraordinarily tall for a fellow classmate. But
So,
what?
I just before we have the Youth Commission report, I just think we saw an excellent example of the bookends of service.
Yeah.
And you see how Bill Summers, after 41 years of service to the Sheriff's Department, and you see a young graduate of West Point.
Yeah.
Makes me emotional.
And all Placer grown.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony. So now we will receive the annual report from the Placer County Youth Commission.
Hi, my name is Kara Sutter. I'm an employee of Health and Human Services, Community Health, and one of the co-advisors for the Placer County Youth Commission. And it's my great pleasure, and I think it is good timing, to see some more Placer-grown youth and what they've been up to this year. They have a short presentation. They have a little slideshow, and then will be available for questions. But with no further ado, I pass it over to the youth. They keep me very busy, so they'll have a lot to talk about.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Andrew Burrows, and I'm the President of the Placer County Youth Commission. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today and for the opportunity to exist as a commission. So in our review, we'll talk about some events that we had this year. The first of which I'll explain about is it was the Placer County Greenwise Youth Summit. That was held in November of 2010, last year, and we held the event in partnership with Sacramento Mayor Kevin Johnson. So the Youth Commission's role in that event was to facilitate and to host the event, which brought together youth from around Placer County and in the Sacramento area to help the mayor further his Greenwise initiative. So at the event, the commissioners helped facilitate discussion and helped get the events of the day moving. And we focused on, at the event, we focused on spreading awareness on the environment, awareness on how we can better the environment, and how things like the economy and our roles as individuals help spread awareness and can help in this movement to help the environment. So this, I think, event was a key step in reaching out beyond the Placer County lines and partnering with, excuse me, with Sacramento Mayor and other groups. Next, I'll pass it off to Derek Ikeda.
Thank you.
Hi, just like Andrew, first of all, thanks for having us here. It's a great honor. I'm Derek Ikeda. I'm the Vice President of the Placer County Youth Commission. And I'm going to be talking about something we brought new to the table this year. It's called the Placer County Youth Commission Ambassador Program. And this furthered our goal of trying to get connected more to the youth of Placer County. So this year we established Placer County Ambassadors, which consisted of 42 youth individuals ranging from 9th grade to 12th grade that would represent the group of their school. So for example, if we have a key club or something at Roseville High, then one of the representatives from them, who's an ambassador of ours, would come in and talk about what their specific group is doing and how it relates to what the commission's goals are. For example, drug and alcohol abuse, or how we had the Race to Nowhere showing. For the Race to Nowhere showing, we had, actually one of our commissioners is going to talk about that more, but we had a lot of ambassadors help us with that. One of our ambassadors, I hope I'm saying her name right, Amber Kakepoto, said that she said the ambassador program provides a hand-on approach in public speaking, group work, and social etiquette. And hopefully the ambassador program will continue to help serve all of Placer County. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Kent Makishima. He's my cousin. Hopefully he does well.
Thank you. Like my previous commissioner said, I'm Kent Makishima, and I'm the treasurer of the Placer County Youth Commission. And I'll be talking about one of our events that we held this year, which was the first countywide medication take-back day, which occurred on September 25th. We hauled over about 3,900 pounds of medication from homes around Placer County, which helped with our goal to reduce teen substance abuse, while also providing an easy way to dispose of medication in the household.
Placer County alone collected about 60% of the DEA's collection for drugs and substances, which ranges from about California to Oregon. We also held another take back drive on April 2011, which held about the same success. So thank you, and I'd like to present Kyle. Thank you.
So I was a first-time board member this year, and I'm going to talk about the Race to Nowhere. One of the Commission's priority areas in 2010 and 2011 was youth social emotional health. National statistics as well as personal experiences pointed to an increase in depression and anxiety in teens. Teens have expressed their feelings that they feel pressure to perform and be perfect in academics, sports, and many other talents. In this culture, the pressure to perform can reach unrealistic and unhealthy levels, and the Youth Commission hoped to change the situation as part of their social emotional health priority area. While researching, the Youth Commission discovered the film The Race to Nowhere, which highlights the stressful achievement culture that overwhelms youth today. At 2 screenings held by the Youth Commission, youth and adults engaged in facilitated discussions and watched the film, as well as receiving information via handouts. The Commission also implemented audience surveys and held discussions on how the film related to their perspectives and how it affected their views. Both showings were well attended, with the Auburn showing being sold out and an admirable turnout of well over 100 for the Roseville showing. Based on the audience's reactions, it was clear the film had touched on issues that were on their minds, and many, including psychologists, chose to share their own thoughts. Now I'm going to turn that over to Daniel.
Hi, my name is Daniel Grafensberger. I'd like to talk about the outcomes from the Race to Nowhere showing. Like Kyle said, we sold out the Auburn showing, and we had 160 attendees for the Roseville showing. So we viewed that as a great success, and we were able to raise awareness about this academic achieving culture. And as many of us are a part of that academic achieving culture, it was nice to share our point of view and talk with teachers, counselors, other school members about the pressures we feel with academics and how we can together change that. And one audience member wrote down, said, as a parent, limit extracurricular activities. As an educator, stress importance of critical thinking. As a citizen, help to reshape our definition of success in this country. Thank you. Now, Josephine.
Hi, my name is Josephine. I'm the Outreach Director on the Placer County Youth Commission, and I'm from District 1. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about our goals as a result of the Race to Nowhere event that we held, since we got a lot of great feedback from the people who attended the event and gave us their survey results. So we were able to find out, what kind of was the response and what we would be able to do in the future as a result of the event, because it was a great opportunity for us to learn and to be able to collect information as well. So we have 2 primary goals for probably the upcoming year on the Youth Commission. And our first goal is to be more involved in policy making. We have a new advisor now. Her name's Carrie, and she's from the Placer County Board of Education, or Office of Education. So that might be something we can be working with. And we're really interested in being able to see what we can do as a commission, since we are like a miniature board of supervisors, to make recommendations or see what we can do in the arena of education, because it's really personal to us as well. So that's one of our goals. And our second goal is to continue being a youth resource, because I think as a youth commission, part of our goal is to be able to do outreach to the community and to have people to be able to listen to us and identify with what we have here. So we will continue to collect resources, and there's a lot of interesting things out there on the Race to Nowhere website and whatnot. So we'll continue to do that and help youth in the community, as well as parents and educators and whatnot. So that's pretty much it. And also, we have some preliminary copies of our 2010 to 2011 annual report, if any of you are interested in seeing, but we eventually will be distributing this to a lot of our partners and whatnot, a final copy. So thank you.
Thank you.
For you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
You guys want to stay for a second? I also, the PowerPoint it is coming. So you'll see some pictures. Oops, it's already been playing. We're about in the middle of it right now. So I'll see what comes up. I wanted to say that this is the final event for this group. Next meeting, you will be getting recommendations for the 2011-2012 Youth Commission, as well as probably I wanted to honor our partner in the Youth Commission, which is the UC Extension and Farm Advisory. They are still a partner. Shannon Dogan has left, my dear co-partner in this, but and I know it was a loss for these young people, but we are excited, and you will be seeing a resolution change probably next meeting too to add PCOA to our partnership. Okay.
Thank you. Jim?
First of all, I want to thank you young people for your service to the Youth Commission. As you know, it's a personal joy of mine to have that in place. I want to thank my trustee aide, Ruth Owls, for her role in working with you. But I'd like to know, all of you who are moving on to higher education, if you could tell us where each of you are going, I would appreciate it. So, Andrew, you want to lead off? And
sure. Next year I'll be starting at Santa Clara University in the area.
Where is it?
Santa Clara.
Oh, okay, great.
Next year I will be going to UCLA.
Hey, huh?
And the rest of them are hopefully returning to the Youth Commission.
Oh, good. All right. Well, great. Again, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your service, and hopefully it's been a joy for me to watch you young people grow. So thank you again.
Thanks for the presentation, and thank you, Jim, for the leadership on all this. Look forward to hearing from you next week.
Just to clarify, Andrew, as president of the Youth Commission this year, you just graduated from where? From Jesuit High School? That's right. Okay, thank you. Go Big Red.
Thank you. We will now move to the next department head item, which is a myriad of contracts from Health and Human Services. Maureen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Maureen Baumann, Health and Human Services Adult System of Care. This morning I am bringing forward 12 contracts necessary for Placer County to provide the unique and mandated mental health services so critical to the residents of our community. On an annual basis, mandated mental health services are provided for approximately 4,400 individuals. The range of psychiatric services that they receive includes crisis, hospital, residential, and out-client services. The residential hospital contracts provide essential, life-saving care for adults with severe mental disorders who are unable to provide for their basic needs, are at risk to themselves or others, and often require 24-hour supervised care. During this last year, 2,245 residents at risk to themselves or others were evaluated, of which 1,102 were required hospitalization and were hospitalized. 250 residents were able to move from a locked facility to a supervised unit with the establishment of our ANCA contract. The telecare and ANCA contracts combine to provide the most appropriate response to those persons at risk who need an immediate response. They were awarded in January 2010 as a result of a request for proposal process. Placer County residents with psychiatric needs who are not able to immediately return to the community receive crucial residential and psychiatric care at the Willow Glen Care Center and the Merced Behavioral Health Center. CR Family Services provides after-hours, weekend, and holiday coverage for crisis evaluations, as well as short-term outpatient mental health therapy and counseling services for individuals and families throughout the county. The Adult System of Care has reviewed each of these mental health contracts to determine the most cost-effective means to provide consistently effective services for the county. Psychiatrists are placed in specific programs in order to provide the highest quality and most cost-effective care. The compensation rate for psychiatrist contracts has remained unchanged since 2006. These contracts are consistent with the ordinance that this board passed on May 18, 2010, as it related to contracted physicians. And Personnel, County Council, and the CEO's office are fully supportive of this approach. Drs. Chima and Kangura are qualified physicians providing comprehensive physical health care for the 757 patients that reside in our PUF. The current rate for these services has also remained unchanged since 2006. The increase in this particular contract is related to the higher utilization of our psychiatric health facility. All of these contracts were reviewed and recommended for approval by the Mental Health, Alcohol, and Drug Advisory Board. at its regular meeting May 23rd, 2011. I would just point out that we do have two separate actions for this group of contracts. For the provider contracts, the 8 provider contracts, we are asking that you approve and authorize the Director of Health and Human Services to sign subsequent amendments up to 10% of each contract, or $49,000, whichever is less. And for the employee contract agreements, we're asking for approval and to authorize the chairman to sign subsequent amendments. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the board? Any comments, questions by the public? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Second.
Of items both A and B? Kirk?
Yes, under A1 through 6 and B1. That's what I, okay, so that's, yes.
Perfect.
Not A, and then subsequently B, Children's System of Care, the next agenda item, but simply, yes, okay.
Right.
All right, yes, A1 through 6 and B1, thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the just discussed contracts. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And item B is Richard Connect Children's System of Care, B, A, and B.
Good morning, Chairman Wygant, members of the board. Richard Connect, Children's System of Care Director. For your consideration this morning under item 14B are 2 umbrella contracts. Continuing now a 3-year trend, we're pleased that costs associated with both of these agreements are being reduced again this year as a result of deepening and improving partnerships with community providers and school districts. To be positioned to meet any further state or federal budget adjustments, combined costs in this year's umbrella contracts will not exceed $1.3 million, representing a $400,000 reduction from last year. By way of context, the county's costs associated with these 2 umbrella agreements are now 1/2 of what they were in 2007, just 4 years ago. In the last 12 months, these 2 contracts provided mental health services to nearly 700 children and adults, and these timely services led to better outcomes for families and at lower cost to the county. Children and youth are, because of these services, able to remain in their homes and schools, and adults are able to better avoid hospitalization. So the first contract leverages about $124,000 in county costs to draw down $626,000 in state and federal dollars for mental health mandates associated with residential group home care. The second contract is for $550,000 for the county's efficient outpatient mental health network of private community providers and therapists, requiring a county contribution of $128,000. This effectively leverages about $422,000 in state monies. I'd recommend your board's approval of the umbrella contract with residential group home providers and the contract with network outpatient providers. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Richard. Kirk?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was on from clarifying my motion previously.
Thank you. I see no questions from the board. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address this item or these items? Pleasure of the board.
Move approval of the item.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item 14B, A, and B. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And item C, Richard.
Item 14C is an amendment to an existing contract. The Children's System of Care and its partners deliver a combination of intensive in-home counseling, crisis stabilization, and mental health services to children and families in Placer County. The department is the mandated last line of defense for many youth experiencing immediate and significant stressors, including suicidal and related behaviors. This time-limited early intervention treatment, including a 24-hour care process, prevents these youth from entering inpatient hospitals or other institutional settings, which are often difficult to access and far more costly. This amendment, for your information, is requested in order to respond to recent successful legal action brought against the state of California, requiring that this service be made available to increasing numbers of youth each year. This increase in contract expenditures of about $96,000 is included in the department's final budget for 10-11. The increase is funded almost exclusively with federal and state dollars, but does require a modest county general fund contribution of about $1,900. I'd be happy to take any questions and recommend your approval.
Any questions of the board? Questions or comments from the public? See none, bring it back to the board.
Move approval of the item.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract with Families First as discussed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And Richard, contract with Kids First.
Children's System of Care enjoys many partnerships as we fulfill our mandates to protect Placer children and support parents and families. Kids First Incorporated has, for more than 20 years, been an outstanding partner in this area. This contract provides a range of community supports and services, including operation of family resource centers, counseling when needed, and support services, which last year were provided to more than 8,000 families. More than 95% of the families served will never require direct county-funded child welfare services or interventions, a result which contributes to the multi-year trend that we've talked about before with the board of reducing demand for foster care and group home care. The total funds requested is $416,066. There are no county general funds required, and I'd recommend your approval.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none. Questions from the public? Pleasure of the board.
Move approval of the item.
Moved and seconded to approve the contract with Kids First as discussed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Richard. And next we have Community Health Consolidated Revenue Agreement with California Department of Public Health. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. Mark Starr with Community Health Clinics and Animal Services. In our local public health programs, we provide many services that benefit all of our residents. Most of these are critical public health services that are provided only via our programs here in our local health department. Some examples include communicable disease control programs, areas such as tuberculosis control, sexually transmitted diseases, vaccine preventable diseases such as influenza, and our current pertussis epidemic that we hope is winding down, began in 2010. All of those communicable disease programs get some funding from the state to help us conduct what we need to do at the local level. We also do things like public health nursing. Our field nurses will go out to homes when necessary to help families with newborns, for example, of premature infants where they need to closely have assistance with care in the home environment. We help with pregnant and parenting teens so that they're successful in their endeavors to complete their education, to become independent parents and economically on their own 2 feet. We help refer people to needed medical care where appropriate, and we do quite a bit of public education and prevention activities in areas such as lead prevention, preventing lead exposure, and working with local programs to minimize the risks from houses with old paint or from things such as ceramic pottery from that have lead in the glaze from other countries. So these are just some examples of the many things that we do in public health that are really uniquely provided in the local setting, local government setting. The funding for some of these programs comes all or in part from the state, and sometimes that's also federal funding passed through to the state to us. Historically, there's been individual contracts for each of these programs, and all the other counties in the state still have individual contracts. But we're the only county in the state that, since 2002, has consolidated many of our public health programs into a single contract with the California Department of Public Health. There's numerous efficiencies gained by doing this, everything from a simplified standard budget to a single claiming process and, of course, a single contract. We don't have to bother you with 7 different contracts or more. But also this allows our staff to take an integrated approach to these services. You can imagine that a public health nurse might be involved with a problem with an infant that also crosses over into communicable disease or other situations such as protecting that infant from pertussis, as I mentioned earlier. So all these integrated approaches are a benefit to our residents because we have the local flexibility to meet the changing demands and the needs of the community and our clients through this consolidated contract approach. On the fiscal side, this contract includes a revenue of about $869,000 and a county general fund match of $345,000 each year for 3 years. It's in our budget this current fiscal year as well as will be in our budgets for the next 2 fiscal years. I'll comment briefly on the delay. This contract begins July 1st of 2010. We had a long negotiation with the state this year and many revisions were required, most notably the removal of 2 programs from this contract because they have a different funding mechanism, the Women, Infants, and Children program and the Tobacco Prevention program. those programs will continue. They'll just be handled separately, so there's no risk to those programs. They'll just be through separate contracts. So things have changed at the state level. The Department of General Services and their ability to allow a consolidated approach across all the programs has changed, and we finally just recently got final approval from them to be able to move this contract forward. So the action I'm requesting today is to approve the Consolidated Revenue Agreement with the California Department of Public Health for the various public health services that it funds in the amount of $2,597,244 for the 3-year period beginning July 1st, 2010, and also authorize the Director of Health and Human Services to sign subsequent amendments. And any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, a couple of questions, Mark. First of all, again, always love hearing more details about the integrated approach that we have in Health and Human Services, which is now known as the Placer model, which I think serves our citizens extraordinarily well, and kudos for that. But so there would be, for lack of this one integrated contract, there would be 7 others in individual contracts?
Yeah, this contract combines 7 programs. Historically, I think this began in 2002 with 15 or 16. Some of those went away because of programs ending or consolidating. 3 of them went with the new Department of Healthcare Services when the old Department of Health Services split into 2. So we actually have 2 consolidated contracts. That one will be up next year. And then I just mentioned that these 2 programs are now, WIC and tobacco will be separate.
And that's another question I had. So these other 2 contracts that you referred to, is that a step backwards for us as it relates to our ability to integrate these deliveries?
On the tobacco program, which actually was on your consent agenda today, which you approved as being able to accept that allocation, there is some loss of efficiency there because it's not a real large program. So this really, the consolidation benefits programs that aren't by themselves. Some of these are only $6,000 and others range up to over $500,000. So putting all those together in a single package gives us the most efficiency. So yes, and the state program's aware that they're losing some benefit of the funding they delivered to us because of this loss of efficiency. You know, we estimate anywhere from 1 to 2 FTEs of staff time, administrative time, are spared by having these contracts all together, and so we're losing a piece of that. On the WIC side of it, it's such a large program by itself that there probably isn't a lot of efficiency loss there, but again, there's certainly some, and there's a lot of overlap between these programs. As you can imagine, anything that serves women and children crosses over multiple programs.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions? Board members, any questions or comments from public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded to approve the contract with the California Department of Public Health for $2.597 million. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is a contract with the County Office of Education for child care services for CalWorks. Cheryl.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Wygant, members of the board. I'm Cheryl Davis from your Human Services Division. Happy first day of summer, and the weather outside is attesting to that very strongly. Today we are requesting your approval of our annual contract with PCOE, or Placer County Office of Education, to administer our child care services for the families we help move from welfare to work. As you know, we are the safety net for families who have no other means of support, and unfortunately the economy of the past few years have put many, many more families at our front door. Despite that, your welfare to work staff are able to move some families back to work or into retraining or into work experience and community services. And some of those families need child care. We contract with PCOE because they administer 2 other child care programs funded by the state. Contracting with them is, again, a show of efficiency because they have the existing infrastructure to make the contracts with the providers, pay the subsidies. We would be duplicating that administrative function. Additionally, because there are 2 other child care programs with them, it makes for a seamless child care system for our families. As they move off of welfare and are no longer eligible for our funded child care, they may be eligible for funded child care from PCOE, and it makes for a very seamless move and less disruption for the children. The contract this year is for a little over $1.9 million, serving about 260 children each on average each month. That is a decrease from the previous years because the legislature has enacted some policies that make fewer families required to participate in welfare to work. are making children over 11 ineligible for child care, are reducing the reimbursement costs for unlicensed child care. Combined, additionally, there is now a new time limit for welfare recipients. Instead of receiving 60 months of welfare in a lifetime, it's now down to 48. All four of those actions combined are decreasing our need for child care by about 100 to 120 children a month. Hopefully many of those families will be able to access care through Placer County's Office of Education and their other child care systems as they move along. But with that, our recommendation today before you is to approve this annual contract. I know, as Graham was saying, there were some budget bills floating around that may undo some of these revisions that they made to policy, in which case we would need to come back and ask you to increase the amount we would contract with PCOE, but until we have a budget, we don't know what that may be. Okay?
Thank you. Any questions of the board? Seeing none, questions, comments from the public? Pleasure of the board. It's been moved and seconded to approve the just under $2 million contract with the Office of Education. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
We will now move to our 10 o'clock timed item, which is a public hearing with regards to garbage collection fee adjustments in franchise areas 1 and 4. Will.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Walt Shaw is going to lead this presentation.
Morning, Walt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I've got just a few slides just to help demonstrate, get a little visual on the breakdown of the fees. Recology Auburn Placer is our franchisee for franchise area 1 and 4 for garbage collection. This encompasses all of the unincorporated county west of Colfax and includes Forest Hill and the Iowa Hill divides. Garbage collection fees are adjusted based on 3 different factors: service, disposal, and the county special fee. And you can see from the slide, the blue represents the service. This portion is Recology's cost for providing collection service. And per the franchise agreement, Recology is entitled to an annual cost of living adjustment for their collection services. The cost of living adjustment is only applied to this portion of the collection fee, and the calculated COLA for this year is 3.76%. The reddish color is the disposal costs. That's the tipping fee charged at the Western Regional Material Recovery Fee for disposal and processing of waste. Tipping fee is going to remain unchanged for this year, so there's no change in the disposal cost. And then the final piece is the county special fee, which is shown in yellow. And that's the special fee funds the county solid waste management program. The existing fee is at 7%, and there's no need to change that right now. It's adequate to fund the program. The ratio between service and disposal varies for different levels of service. And you can see from the first slide is a single can service, $17.36 is the total cost, and it's broken out by the service and disposal. But if we go to the next slide, that's the toter service, and you see there's a little bit of variation, a little less service compared to disposal. The next slide is the commercial, and you can see the blue portion or the service portion is a much larger portion of the overall collection fee. And then finally, just to go the other direction, I got a slide for the 6-can service, which is a residential service, and you can see the disposal and the service portions are almost equal. So when we apply the COLA to the service portion, collection fees that have the highest service component compared to the disposal will be more impacted by the COLA. That's why the overall change in the collection fees varies from level of service. And you can see that in the Exhibit 8 in the memo where it shows the percentage increase for each level of service, and it varies from each level of service. In June of 2010, your board approved an amendment to the franchise agreement that resulted in no increase in garbage collection fees. This was achieved by lowering the special fee from 8% to 7%. And in lieu of their full COLA in 2010-11, Recology agreed to a one-time cash payment with the understanding that the fiscal year 11-12 garbage collection fees would be calculated based on a full 2010-11 COLA. So the 2011-12 fees are proposed to increase from 1% to 4%, and that's going to depend on the level of service. As a couple examples, toter is going to increase from $29.08 a month to $29.99 per month. This is a 3.1% increase. Commercial bin is going to increase from $102.72 a month to $106.72 a month. This is a 3.9% increase. Again, Exhibit A shows all the listed services and their respective increases. As we noted in the memo, all owners of developed property in the Forest Hill Divide who are billed a basic fee for the operation and maintenance of the Forest Hill Transfer Station were noticed in compliance with Prop 218. The clerk of the board will provide a tally of the written protests that were received. If a majority of affected property owners had filed written protests, the proposed fee change would not be imposed. We had sent out 2,273 notices to the Forest Hill property owners. We had 52 or 54 were returned undeliverable. And I believe as of Friday, we had 2 protests received at the clerk's office.
That's correct.
Property owners in areas 1 and 4 who don't have access to the Forest Hill Transfer Station are not subject to the basic fee, and therefore they're not subject to Prop 218 noticing. These customers were notified through a notice in their billing statement and through newspaper advertisements. Over the last several years, Facility Services and your board have taken steps to minimize increases in garbage collection fees by reducing the special fee rate and negotiating with Recology to minimize or defer their service costs. As a result, fees have remained unchanged for the last 3 years in areas 1 and 4. Therefore, staff recommends your board conduct a public hearing, adopt a resolution, authorize the chairman to sign the amendment to the franchise agreement, and make a finding pursuant to Public Resource Code as noted in the memo. And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions we can on this item.
Any questions of the board members at this time? Jennifer.
Can you tell me, what is a toter?
Well, toters aren't used in the eastern Tahoe Truckee area. They're the 96-gallon cans that are can be picked up automatically with the garbage collection trucks. They're larger than the regular single can service.
I can picture it. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a public hearing. I'll currently open up the public hearing then and see if anyone from the public would like to address this item. Please come forward and state your name.
My name is Betsy Kluge. I'm a homeowner in Weimar. We were fortunate enough to buy a bank-owned home, which is cheaper than rent. That's why we did it. We're on fixed income. We're also both handicapped. And we're just very concerned because, you know, it's $2 here and $4 there. It's not only the refuse company, it's our water company. We're paying $400 a year for a tank that needs to be replaced now, which is going in the process of being replaced. So we're paying more for our water. It's a private water district with 400 users. We pay PG&E. We're on the CARE program, which is a wonderful program. And I'm just wondering if you're concerned, which I assume is a private entity, is that correct, not a government entity?
Recology is under contract with Placer County to collect.
Yeah, so, but you're private and you're contracted with them. If you could just consider people on fixed income and handicapped people when you do your rates. We've reduced, when we first moved in, we needed a toter, we got the toter, and now we switched to a 32-gallon garbage can. They request that you purchase and furnish your own can for disposal, which we have done. So I'm just wondering where this is going to go. Is everything going to keep going up and up like this? That's my only comment. I just wish that you would take some of us old farts into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address this item? Excuse me. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for further questions or comments or action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the item just discussed. Tony, did you?
I was going to say that we're going to adopt the resolution authorizing the chairman to sign the amendment to the franchise agreement and then make the findings pursuant to section 21080B8 of the Public Resources Code.
Thank you, Tony. Perfect.
That's what
All those in favor, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. So I will point out that that clock is a little bit slow, and we can then move to our 10:15 item. And it's a sewer maintenance District 2 and 3 service area rate increases. Will, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will Dickinson, Facility Services. The item before you today concerns connection fees, which are fees that are paid by new customers connecting to our sewer districts in District 2, Granite Bay, and 3 in the Horseshoe Bar area, and County Service Areas 28, Zones 2A3, which is Sunset Whitney, and 173, which is the Dry Creek area. We're asking you to conduct a public hearing today to receive comments concerning the proposed increases in the connection fees, adopt the attached ordinance adjusting the connection fees, and make a finding pursuant to Section 21080B8 of the Public Resources Code that the fees are derived directly from the cost of providing service and therefore exempt from environmental review. New customers in these districts are required to pay connection fees before receiving service. As of 2009, the fee was $7,721 per EDU, which is equivalent dwelling unit, which is the same as a single-family home. From this amount, $6,247 was transmitted directly to the South Placer Wastewater Authority to repay debt associated with the treatment plant capacity in Roseville. The balance of $1,474 was deposited to a reserve account within the districts that accepted the new connections. These local reserves will be used to pay for future trunk line capacity projects in those districts. In July of this year, the SPWA connection fee will increase to $6,547, so $300 more than it's currently, or that it was in 2009. Staff recommends that your board pass through the SPWA regional fee increases from the last 2 years by adding $300 to the connection fee collected from customers in the affected districts, newly connecting customers only. Choosing not to take this action would result in a loss of the revenue to the local districts projected at approximately $9,000 per year. We're not seeking any increase in the local district portion of this fee, just the regional portion, and just passing that through as it was prescribed to us from the SPWA. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can commence the public hearing.
Any questions of the board members this time? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, and I will open it up to the public for any comments or questions. Does anyone from the public wish to address the board on this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the ordinance adjusting the connection fees and make the findings pursuant to the appropriate section of the Public Resource Code. How did I do, Tony? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's now move to our, go back to the department Sheriff's Department consider an amendment to the contract for law enforcement, City of Colfax. And Jan, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Wygant, members of the board. I apologize in advance. I've got laryngitis, so bear with me. I need to speak slowly.
But there's a ton of questions, too. I apologize.
We're here this morning to request your board's approval of Amendment Number 2 to a contract between the Sheriff's Department and the City of Colfax to authorize the chairman to sign that agreement and the sheriff to execute the agreement. The contract term is July 1 through June 30th, 2012. The contract amount is $547,901, representing a net increase of $9,567, which will be included in our final budget. The increase is primarily due to salary adjustments. There is no impact to the general fund as a result of this agreement, and with that, myself and the Colfax Sergeant Andrew Scott are here, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. By the way, this has been approved by the City of Colfax.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Jan. I actually have a couple of questions, and I'm going to have to refer to the next item as well, because I'm a little confused about the disparity in the increases in the contracts. And I don't have a problem, you know, in terms of paying appropriate costs, but I guess what concerns me is looking at the two contracts that are in front of us today. The one for Colfax is an increase of $9,567, which is almost 2% of the total contract amount. But the increase for the Town of Loomis is 0.35%. And I wonder what drives the difference between those two.
So the methodology that we use to develop the contracts, both these and other contracts within the Sheriff's Office, we start with a standardized approach where we use a portion of a beat. In this case, we have a half of a beat. In the case of Loomis, we have just about a full beat. So we start with a beat and we use deputy salaries. Then we also take into consideration things like shift differential. We calculate the portion of vehicles. And so it's pretty standardized, but then we get down to specific agreements with each city based on their needs, so there can be variances. In the case of Colfax, the percentage increase was more for this. It's a smaller beat, and it's just usually in salaries and who's included in that and what the coverage is. The city of Colfax, we have specifics because of the size of the city in coverage. So it's based on each city's need.
Okay, and would that have been, would that specific information have been included in what's referred to as Exhibit A in this, which is not in our board packet?
Exhibit A should have been the actual spreadsheets that drove the discussions with the cities in the contract.
Yeah, they're not in the board packet. In the future, if we could make sure that those were included, then I would be able to understand what really drives that cost differential.
Absolutely.
'Cause it looks on the face of it a little crazy that we're looking at a 2% increase in Colfax and only a 0.35 in the city of Loomis.
And we'll be sure to get that information to you, and we can follow up to answer any other questions as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are there any questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the contract with the city of Colfax for law enforcement services for $547,000 plus. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And next, a similar contract with the Town of Loomis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. We are also requesting your board's approval of amendment number 2 with the agreement with the Town of Loomis. The contract term, again, is July 1 through June 30th, 2012. The total contract amount is $1,349,342, representing a net increase of $4,720, which again will be included in our final budget. And this increase is once again due to primarily salary adjustments. With that, Loomis Station Commander Wayne Wu, who has just taken over for Captain Harris, is here, and he can also answer questions, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of board members? See none. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public? See none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Move approval of the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the Town of Loomis law enforcement contract for $1.3+ million. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so now let's hop back to our 1020 item, which is also with the Sheriff's Department public hearing ordinance regarding booking fees with our cities. Jan.
Chairman Wygant, members of the board, we are here this morning to request that your board conduct a public hearing, receive public comment, adopt an ordinance amending various sheriff office fees. Recommended fee adjustments are based on in-depth studies of actual costs, and these studies have been made available to the public at various locations. We have 3 types of fee increases that we're requesting adjustments in your approval of. They are fees to the public, fees to our cities, also known as booking fees, and fees to arrestees. The first I'm going to address are the fees for fingerprinting, also known as live scan fees. They are being recommended to increase from $15 to $20, a $5 increase per fingerprinting service. The recommended increase affects other sheriff office fees that would necessarily require fingerprinting as part of the processing. Those would include various permits, licensing, background checks like concealed weapons permits and those kinds of things. The next fee is our jail booking fee that we charge to the cities. The fee increased from $129 to $132. It is driven by AB 1805, enacted in 2006, and it is for low-level bookings and processing of persons arrested by a peace officer from one of the cities and brought to the county jail for incarceration. The charges are based on statute and a formula, and they are based on the rate in place as of June 2006 plus current consumer price index increase and 1% compounded annually. So every year they go up a little bit under AB 1805. This year they have gone from 129 to 132. We get about 90% from the state currently, and we charge the cities the remainder 10%, so the increase will be $13.20 in 2011-12. If a local agency exceeds its 3-year average number of non-felony bookings, we are also by statute able to charge the full booking fee costs on the excess amount. And the full booking fee costs for 2011-12 is $296, which is actually down from $393. We did notify the cities in May that this was coming before your board. We alerted them to the fact that the backfill funding that we received from the state, known as vehicle license fee, was at risk, and that as provided in statute, if that funding goes away, the cost on every booking will be half of the booking fee cost, which is $296, so it would be $148 if VLF goes away. Also being adjusted is our jail access fee. It has, same as booking fee, it has gone from $393 down to $296. Adjusted as well are the fees for incarceration, and those are based on the ability to pay, and they must be ordered by the court, but they will be adjusted for the main jail from $167 to $118 per day, and increase for minimum security from $66 to $86 a day. The decrease in the booking fees is based on staffing reductions, other cost reductions, partially from budget constraints. We've reduced our staffing levels, and so that affects the amount allocated to booking fees. For the daily jail rate, those adjustments are based also on jail population, which has declined slightly. Our daily jail rate has been established at $119.27, and we must do that annually in order to bill the state back for prisoners that are held there on the state's behalf. With that, I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. We do have our jail commander, Captain Malem, is here, and also our support services captain, Don Hutchinson, is here, and any of us would be happy to answer questions that you or the public may have.
Thanks, Jen. Questions of the board, or from the board? Seeing none, are there any, well, this is a public hearing, so I'll open this up to the public for anyone from the public who'd like to address the board on this issue. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action.
Move approval of the ordinance adjusting various sheriff's office fees.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the ordinance as per the discussion adjusting the various fees described. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jen. close enough?
10:30.
10:30, yeah, thanks. We will now take up our 10:30 timed item, Health and Human Services, Community Services Block Grant Action Plan. Maureen.
Good morning again. Maureen Baumann, Health and Human Services. I'm delighted to bring to you federal funds to be used in Placer County with no county obligation. This is on behalf of the Community Services Commission and their established priorities for the next 2 years. I want to acknowledge Supervisor Holmes, who's been a long-standing member of this commission, and maybe not, thought we had some folks, but maybe not. So we have 3 actions for you this morning: to conduct a public hearing to consider the Placer County Community Action Plan for calendar years 2012 and 2013, to sign the Certificate of Community Action Plan and assurances, and lastly, to approve a resolution authorizing the Director of Health and Human Services to apply for and enter into a contract with the California Department of Community Services and Development to receive funds under the calendar years 2012 and 13. So the California Department of Community Services and Development makes funding in the annual amount of $257,403 available to Placer County through the Federal Community Services Block Grant. Community Services Block Grant funds are specifically directed to meet needs of the unmet needs of low-income citizens. The plan is based upon the prioritization of needs of the low-income community approved by the Placer County Community Services Commission. The priorities were established for 12-13 when they conducted a forum on April 26, 2011. There was information and comments on the needs assessment that were obtained orally and in writing, and also used multiple sources to establish the needs. The most frequently identified needs this year were identified as food, shelter, transportation, and healthcare costs, as well as the need for a growing number of poor who have lost jobs and homes due to the economic downturn. From this needs assessment, the Community Services Commission has agreed that all programs and activities that support the overall goal of family self-sufficiency in Placer County should be considered for funding when they do the RFP, which is the way they will award them. Just briefly, from 2010, I would highlight that 8,020 individuals representing 3,500 families were served. Some of the highlights are 19,000 received emergency transportation, another 19,000 plus received emergency shelter, 578 seniors and 425 individuals with disabilities were assisted to maintain stable independent living. To highlight, the county retains a 12% portion of this grant award in order to provide the staffing necessary for the commission. And with that, I would recommend approval, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Maureen. Any questions to the board members? Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any question. I just want to let the board be aware that my role on the Community Services Commission, which dispenses these funds, I always make sure that it goes countywide. The Gathering Inn in Roseville receives some, Salvation Army in the Auburn area that takes care of a lot of the general Auburn area, and then of course the Tahoe region receives some of those funds. So it's important that they're dispersed throughout the county. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Any other questions? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so I'll open it up to the public for anyone who'd like to comment or address the board. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action.
Move approval of the item.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to sign the certification of community action plan and assurances and approve the resolution authorizing the Director of Health and Human Services to apply for enter into the contract with California Department of Community Services and Development. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will now take up our 10:35 timed item, which is Community Development Resources Zoning Text Amendment regarding emergency shelters, transitional housing, supportive housing.
Paul Thompson with Planning Services, along with Crystal Jacobson. Staff is bringing forward the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval of a zoning text amendment to the Placer County zoning ordinance in order to add definitions to and development standards for emergency shelters, transitional and supportive housing. And this is in order to implement the Placer County housing element. And here to present this item is Crystal.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Crystal Jacobson with Placer County Planning, and the item before your board's consideration is a modification to the county's zoning ordinance in order to implement, as Paul said, the county's housing element programs G2 and G3 specifically. So this is a zoning text amendment proposal, and it's related to emergency shelters, transitional housing, and supportive housing. Uh-oh, now I've gone too far. Sorry about that. So real quick, just to touch base on what those programs are. Programs G2 and G3 are within the county's housing element, which your board approved in May, or adopted, excuse me, in May 2009. Program G2 of the housing element states that the county shall continue to provide for transitional and permanent supportive housing in the form of group housing, and that the county shall explicitly state that the transitional and supported housing are considered residential uses in the county and subject to the same standards as other residential uses within the same zone districts. Program G3 of the housing element states that the county shall amend the zoning ordinance to include emergency shelters as allowed land uses in the residential multifamily zone district by right, and then with discretionary review in 5 other zoning districts, which I'll get to here in just a second. So it should be noted that the implementation of these programs is required under California state law. In 2007, Senate Bill 2 was signed into law and amended the state housing element law to require all jurisdictions to provide for at least one zoning district where emergency shelters are allowed by right, and to ensure that other zone districts do not unduly restrict the development of emergency shelters within the county. SB 2 also required local jurisdictions to address transitional and supportive housing in their zoning ordinances specifically defined, and that they would only, as I noted earlier, only be subject to the restrictions that apply to other residential uses within those districts. So to help kind of understand the differences between these uses and offer some information and clarification about them and examples, there's this chart that we have prepared for you. Transitional housing is limited with respect to the time and the length of stay. It's limited to 24 months. Services provided under transitional housing are offered, and participation is typically required. So those services sometimes are medical services, other times they're classes. It's really to kind of get people on their feet, transition them from an emergency shelter situation into an otherwise residential use. So examples of those would be in the county are Hope, Help and Healing, and Peace for Families. Supportive housing, with respect to the time or the length of stay, there's no limit on the time or length of stay, so it's considered permanent housing. Services are offered, but participation is not required. A lot of times you do see the services offered, though. Examples of this would be adult system of care, various facilities throughout the county. And then emergency shelters are different in that the time or length of stay is limited to 6 months or less. Services may be offered. It depends on the program that's being that is offered. And then examples of that would be the Gathering Inn in Placer County. So it is important to note that those definitions are actually contained within the Senate bill or within the state law. They're defined under sections 508.01, 506.75, and 506.75.2 under the Health and Safety Code. So these specific definitions, the first task that we had to do for the zoning amendment was to define these, and the definitions are to include the definitions that are required by state law. So they were not previously defined, but they were rather grouped under and considered as the existing residential care home definition in our zoning ordinance. So the first step in this zoning ordinance amendment was to define these uses. The second step was to develop some standards for emergency shelters, and this is noted in Senate Bill 2. And these, I'll go through these standards really quick. Facilities must be within 300 feet apart from one another, so you can't have any two shelters located any closer than that. A minor use permit would be required if a emergency shelter is 500 feet from any school or any zone district that would not otherwise be permitted. The use wouldn't otherwise be permitted in. They have to comply with the development standards for residential multifamily district and applicable design guidelines within those districts. They need to meet all building and housing codes and fire standards. And then there's also some business practice development standards that are included in this, and they include one staff member must be present when the facility is open, adequate security lighting, and then we also deal with parking in the development standards. They need to demonstrate a need for parking, and then there would be a minimum of 1 space for a manager and 1 space per employee, and then all parking would be required to be on site. So this is a matrix, actually a snapshot of a matrix right out of the ordinance, and it shows the changes to the ordinance. It shows the newly defined uses in which districts they would now be allowed in, and what the land use entitlement would be required for if they weren't allowed by right. So in residential multifamily, right here you can see that those uses would be allowed by right, and that would be up to 60 beds or less. You go over 60 beds and a discretionary review would be required, so it would be a minor use permit. So, and then in the neighborhood commercial, a minor use permit would be required for these uses. In general commercial, it would be a conditional use permit. Commercial plan development, it would be a conditional use permit. Highway service would require a minor use permit, and then finally, the resort zone district would require a minor use permit as well. So to get back to the 60 bed count, the 60 bed count came about after negotiations with service providers in the area. They were seeking 100, and staff had initially developed a recommendation for 20 units. That would be 20 units, which would result in about 60 beds. So we arrived at that 60 bed count standard since the maximum density permitted in the residential district is 20 units per acre. It would be presumably feasible to have 60 bedrooms if you assume that you have 3 units per acre or 3 bedrooms per unit, and then you can get about 60 beds per person per acre. So with that, staff took that, arriving at the 60 beds to the service providers, and they had agreed to that threshold. So in addition to this, and finally the last change to the ordinance is that we had to make some modifications to a couple of existing definitions in the ordinance. One is the residential care home definition, and the other is houses of worship. So these uses are existing, as I just noted, and they were the typical uses that would address these types of needs, these special housing needs. And so we had to make some amendments to them to be consistent with this, with the housing element. And so those are contained in attachment A of your board report. So with that, this proposed ZTA was presented to the Planning Commission on 2 separate occasions. It was first presented on October 8th, 2009, where it was, the Planning Commission took action to continue it. They did direct staff to present the amendment to all of the county MACs. And accordingly, it was presented to the MACs, and a summary of those actions is contained in your staff report, attachment C. Since that time, well, since 2009, we made our way through the MACs, and then we also made some refinement to the zoning text. And then the zoning text amendment was presented again to the Planning Commission on October 28th, 2010, where the Commission took action to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment to your board. So with that, staff brings forward the Planning Commission's recommendation that your board approve the proposed zoning text amendment as provided in attachment A of your staff report and based upon the findings contained within the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Questions at this time? Jennifer.
Crystal, could you go back to slide number 4, please? Thank you. Just so I understand, the housing types that are listed up here, do we have existing uses that fall into this transitional supportive and emergency shelters?
We address these types of uses under the existing definitions of residential care homes and houses of worship. These specific types, as defined here, are not now defined in the ordinance, so that's what this is doing. So under the state law, they're requiring that these uses have to be called out in the ordinance.
So currently then, and thank you, that's really what I was getting at. Currently, you need to either be a house of worship or you need to be a residential care home to provide these sorts of services that we're going to be breaking down into these smaller subsections.
Yes, they fall within those definitions.
Are there any hotels in the county that provide that sort of service, or is it just houses of worship and residential care?
There may be, but I'm unaware of that.
And what would it take currently for a hotel to provide that sort of a service?
They would have to get a use permit to be a residential care home.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the board this time? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so I will open this item up to the public for any comments, questions. Please come forward and state your name.
Good morning. My name is Susan Farrington. I am the Executive Director of the Sierra Foothills AIDS Foundation. I am also the Chair of the Placer Consortium on Homelessness. I would like to start by commending staff in including services providers in this process. We had a very good working relationship with staff, and I think we all came away with a better understanding of both the law and the best ways to implement it here in Placer County. HUD requires that every continuum of care do a point-in-time homeless count in the last 10 days of January on odd years. On January 24th, 2011, the Placer Consortium on Homelessness, acting as the continuum of care, conducted such a point-in-time survey. The results of that survey indicated that we had a total of 631 individuals living in Placer County that met the HUD definition of homeless. Of those, 278 were unsheltered at the time of the count. We have tremendous need in this county for services for people who are presently homeless. The transitional houses in this county do an excellent job of providing services to the people that choose to use them. However, transitional beds are only able to accommodate at this point 259 of the homeless people that exist at any point in this county. And at this point, there are transitional houses that, due to the economic downturn, are having to either close their units or drastically reduce their plans for expansion in the future. So with that being said, the Gathering Inn does an excellent job of providing a nomadic shelter for 60 to 80 individuals at any given time. However, that still is not enough to meet the unmet need here in this community. I would very much encourage you to pass this ordinance at this point, and I would like to again thank you for your continued support in working with services providers for people living with housing issues, including homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public who please come forward and state your name?
Hi, my name's Colleen Carlson, and I'm here as a voice for I was a formerly homeless person, and now I am, 2.5 years later, I'm a productive member of society in Placer County, and I have a full-time job, and I have sustainable living, and I go to school full-time. I think it is important to have a permanent shelter in Placer County other than the Gathering Inn, because the Gathering Inn is always full and there's a lot of people that are out. It's a hand up and not a handout for people that want to get their lives back together. And I am also on the board for Placer County, or Placer Consortionists on Homelessness, and I was part of the homeless count. And there is an increase in Auburn from the last count. There's a big increase in Auburn for unsheltered, and I think it's very important to have a permanent supportive or permanent shelter here in Placer County. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the public or address the board on this issue?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Herb Whitaker, and I'm the managing attorney of the local office of Legal Services of Northern California. We are the nonprofit corporation that provides free legal assistance to low-income clients in Placer County. And we do a lot of work with homeless clients. We do a lot of work with the service providers, including a number of people that are listed up there on the board. Thank you for this opportunity to address you this morning concerning this important matter. I'd like to begin by just stating that our office and I am in support of the adoption of the zoning amendments as they have been approved by the Planning Commission and as they have been presented by the staff. And I'll keep my comments very brief because I've already submitted written comments, which I believe are in your packet, and so I would certainly appreciate it if you would take a look at those and read those comments. To begin with, there's absolutely no question that there's a tremendous need for a homeless shelter in Placer County. That need has been well documented, and it's been addressed today both in the staff packet and by Susan Farrington. Secondly, there's been plenty of process and discussion and debate about this issue going back for several years, and you've heard about that process as well. And so I would encourage the board to go ahead and act on this matter today because I don't feel that there's need for additional process. The third point that I'd like to talk about is the law, and as a lawyer, that's my province. You have already heard from staff that there is a legal requirement for Placer County to adopt something to address this issue. This is required both in the Placer County housing element and in state law SB 2. Just a couple of things that I would like for this board to consider is primarily the purpose of SB 2. The purpose of SB 2 is to remove regulatory constraints, government constraints, and political constraints that would prevent the development of an affordable housing shelter. And what are we talking about? We're talking primarily about NIMBYism. Now, I don't have a big fancy PowerPoint presentation, so I go old school, and I've got my little button here that I have worn before the Board of Supervisors several times when we address affordable housing issues. So this is my YIMBY button, which stands for Yes in My Backyard, as opposed to NIMBY, which is No in My Backyard. And that's really the purpose for SB 2, because what we recognize is that over and over again, if I may be allowed to briefly wrap up, sure. Over and over again, what we see is that when people come forward with an affordable housing development, especially something like an emergency shelter, there are not that many people who are living there and can come forward and say, yes, this is my house, I need some support, but you have neighbors who say it's a great idea, but they don't want it in their neighborhood. That's why the state legislation wanted Placer County to adopt a by right ordinance so that there will not be discretionary approval through conditional use permit, and it will be approved by right. Now, the real issue here is the number of people who, the maximum density that would be allowed in this type of by right development. And as has been reported by the staff, my office took the very strong position that there should be no limit on the number of people, but if we had a limit, it should be 100. And staff originally took the position that it should be 20. So we were quite far apart, but we worked very hard to get to the number of 60. And staff explained to you the reasoning for arriving at the number of 60, which is something that I can agree with. But the other thing that I want to submit to you is that from working with the service providers, including Susan Farrington here, who gets grants to provide shelter for homeless persons, you can't get a grant if you propose anything for less than 60 people. It just doesn't work. It's a farce. It's a non-entity. You cannot get the funding, you cannot have the economies of scale, you cannot provide the level of service that will be required for Placer County to be interested in that type of grant, much less for the state or the federal government to be interested in that kind of grant. So that's the other reason that we were willing to live with the number of 60 as being the absolute minimum, because that's the only number that's even remotely realistic. Now, if the county has found through some additional studies that there is some reason why between the number of 20 and 60 there are significant impacts on the county that would require a conditional use permit, if the county has found that kind of study, I have not seen it, and I have not seen that data. But I can tell you that 60 would be the absolute minimum. So I would merely urge the board to adopt the ordinance with the number that we have here of 60. I'm available for questions.
Kirk? Yes.
Are you in favor of what staff is supporting? Or
Yes,
staff?
sir, I am.
Okay. I just need to clarify because I got a little mixed up there. Thank you.
Sorry about it. That was a little confusing. All right.
I see no other questions. Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the board on this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring back the item to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank the staff for working through this. I know you've been out to the MAC meetings and giving information to the MAC members, and I know it's been a long, tedious process, but I want to thank you for your service to that, and I would move approval of the item.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the zoning text amendments with regards to emergency shelters, transitional housing, and supportive housing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we will jump back to our last department item. So to do that, we will adjourn as the Placer County Board of Supervisors and reconvene as the Placer County Redevelopment Agency and consider redevelopment agency budget. Jim.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Jim LeBou, Redevelopment Agency. You heard earlier this morning from Graham a report on the furious flurry of activity going on at the state, which as yet has not amounted to anything and no decisions that affect us. So, but as was also discussed this morning, there is a good likelihood that they will do something. They need to in order to get paid. So we don't know yet what that's going to be. So we don't have a budget that reflects any change from the state. So the budget coming before you is assuming status quo in terms of our revenue stream and being able to carry out our programs. If the state does take action that takes funds or, as has been mentioned, even potentially try to eliminate us, we'll need to come back to you shortly and discuss what that all means and what our options are in the near future. The budget before you is a conservative budget. We assumed a 5% reduction across the board in tax increment revenue, a status quo in projects and programs. The only new project proposed in the budget is assistance for the Tahoe City Fire Station, currently in construction, $520,000 contribution. That is a proposal that's being worked on, but it is included in the budget so that if and when you would agree to that funding, it would be available in our budget. The budget includes funding to pay the county for providing various services by different departments. Similar to previous years, you already approved earlier today authorization to enter into these service agreements with various different departments. We are proposing no new staff. In fact, our staff in the last couple of years has been reduced approximately 25%. We have vacant positions. We are not filling those positions, but the budget does have funding to potentially fill those positions if we found that we were able to carry out all of our projects and programs and we needed that extra staff, but nothing is being proposed at this time to do so. The total budget is for approximately $29.2 million, which includes approximately $6.7 million of new tax increment revenue coming in this year. 1.8 million of that is housing set-aside funds that are restricted to use for improving and increasing the supply of affordable housing. 4.9 million approximately is discretionary tax increment. We are carrying over approximately $17.3 million from last fiscal year, and there are approximately $5.2 million coming from other sources, grants, loans, contributions from property owners, interest income, and so forth. We are planning for approximately $23 million of expenditures during the fiscal year. which includes about $2.9 million of payment for existing debt. But of course, that could be affected by what the state does in the coming weeks. We are proposing that $6.2 million of our budget will be left over at the end of the year and will carry over into next year if we're not able to spend the entire $23 million this year, which is, there's a good chance we wouldn't, and if those funds are still left over, then that would be a larger reserve that would carry over into next year. As I mentioned, we are looking anxiously at what the state is going to do that would affect us. We have been undertaking a number of exercises internally to study our revenues, to study the proposed legislation and how it would affect us, our revenues, our staffing. There are some programs and projects and revenue streams that would continue regardless of, even if the state eliminated redevelopment, some of our funds do not come from redevelopment sources, and so those would continue. And so we've been looking at all of that and expect to be ready to come back to you with analysis and options for how to proceed into the future. But for now, we need to have, in order, when July 1st comes, in order for us to be able to pay bills, in order for us to be able to meet payroll, we have to have a budget in place. So we're proposing this proposed budget for adoption and hope for the best.
Thanks, Jim. Jennifer.
Yeah, I asked County Council if there was a need for me to recuse myself on this because my husband is an employee of North Tahoe Fire, and some piece of this is going to that. So, Tony, if you could just address that, please.
No, my opinion is that you do not. I mean, this is a redevelopment program for construction, and it's not going to the general operating budget of the fire district and would not, in any event, benefit your husband or yourself.
No, it would not. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Any other questions by the board? Any comments from anyone in the public? Seeing none? Yeah, I'll just comment that to me, it's this point in my career, I guess it's just almost surreal that the state would even consider vaporizing all of the good work that's been done through redevelopment agencies for local governments as an economic development tool, simply because they refuse to balance their own budget, as the rest of us have. But with that editorial, pleasure of the board.
I move we adopt the resolution approving redevelopment agency fiscal year 2011-2012 proposed budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded to essentially adopt the redevelopment agency budget as discussed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Jim. We will now reconvene as the Board of Supervisors and go into closed session. Tony.
And the board will take up the items on page 6, number 17. There are 5 pieces of litigation and labor discussions for both PPEO and DSA. I assume we will be back at or about 11:30 for the timed item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Johnson with Community Development. Before you today is a third-party appeal of a Planning Commission action to approve and uphold an appeal of the zoning administrator related to a minor use permit for the Tahoe Paddle and Oar business in the Kings Beach area. Today's presentation will be made by Steve Bielna.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good morning.
I'd like to go ahead and, I'm Steve Bielna, Supervising Planner at the Tahoe City office. I'd like to start out today's presentation with just a little bit of history on this project. The operation of this recreation concession began back in 2004. On May 18th, 2004, Tahoe Paddle and Oar applied for a minor use permit to allow 20 kayaks to be located on the southeast corner of the Falcon Lodge site. If you look up at the screen right here, the Falcon Lodge site is located just east of State Route 267, south of Highway 28, near the shores of Lake Tahoe. This next slide here, I'll just take a moment to kind of orient you to some of the existing activities in the area. The property that's highlighted in red is the Falcon Lodge site. This is a 20-room motel use. There's 4 multifamily units and a manager's unit. The location just to the west is the property that's owned by the appellant. That's the Ferrari Crown Motel. Immediately to the east is Steamer's Restaurant. This also contains recreation concession, the North Shore Parasail, and jet ski operation. I'll speak to that in just a minute when we get to the discussion on parking. Then the site just to the north and across the highway. This is the Tahoe Paddle and Oar retail store location. That's where the business itself will actually be conducted. So, back in 2004, the decision by the zoning administrator to approve this minor use permit was actually appealed to the Planning Commission and to the board. And each location, the approval was upheld. One of the things that occurred out of this appeal process was there was a condition placed on the entitlement that limited the approval of the permit to a 5-year time period. The reasoning or rationale behind that limitation was during the appeal process there was concerns raised about compliance with other operators in the vicinity with their conditions of approval. So this provided a mechanism to take a look at their compliance with issues specifically related to the number of watercraft, illegal signage, and adequate refuse collection. 1 year prior to the approval in 2005, the entitlement came back to the county for a modification. This request was to change the project description. Originally it came through with a on-season, off-season. The modification request was to eliminate the off-season component. That decision to approve the modification was not appealed. So, because the 5-year time limitation was set to expire, the applicant applied for a modification to the minor use permit prior to the December 2010 time limitation. At the same time, the applicant requested to increase the capacity of the minor use permit entitlement to increase it from the 20 kayaks that were originally approved to increase it to 40 kayaks. This item went to the zoning administrator on February 2nd, 2011. The zoning administrator received testimony from the applicant, the now appellant, Mr. Ferrari, and the Development Review Committee staff, and the zoning administrator approved that decision. The zoning administrator did make a couple modifications to the suggested conditions of approval for this entitlement. There was a modification to the time limitation. The request was for a 5-year extension. The zoning administrator asked that the entitlement come back, or that a request come back to the zoning administrator to review it, to make a determination whether to extend it for the full 5-year time period within 1 year. The second modification had to do with the number of rooms at the motel. The zoning administrator imposed a condition that would require that 10 rooms of the motel remain vacant. The reasoning behind this was to address some concerns about parking that came up during the hearing process. This decision to approve the minor use permit was appealed by Dave Ferrari on February 14th. There was a number of issues that were raised within the appeal, most of which all were directed towards the operation of the Falcon Lodge Motel and issues with compliance, so on and so forth. Included in the rationale was that within the last 3-year time period, there have been 258 calls for service from local law enforcement for activities occurring at the Falcon Lodge Motel. Before this appeal was to be considered by the Planning Commission, this went to the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council on 2 occasions. Once as an informational item, second time as an action item. At that time, the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council unanimously recommended that the Planning Commission deny the minor use permit. The reasoning or rationale and the discussion that occurred at that meeting included discussion on activities that have been occurring, the condition of the Falcon Lodge site itself. In addition, the council expressed concern that the minor use permit could exacerbate some of the existing problems related to the Falcon Lodge property. At the Planning Commission hearing on May 12th, In a departure from the standard county practice and based on the new information that we received at the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council, county staff recommended that the appeal be granted and the minor use permit be denied. This recommendation focused primarily on the safety concerns by drawing additional persons to a site that had a documented history of problems with local law enforcement. The Planning Commission received testimony from the Development Review Committee, the appellant, the applicant, and the Falcon Lodge property owner. The Planning Commission did not come to the conclusion that by denying the minor use permit that this would improve the condition at the motel. Therefore, the Commission denied the appeal and granted the minor use permit. In rendering their decision, the Planning Commission did remove the condition that required that 10 rooms remain vacant at the hotel site. In addition, the Planning Commission also made a modification to the time limit condition that was imposed on the project. The zoning administrator's decision did not require a public hearing to consider the full 5-year extension, whereas the Planning Commission wanted the application to come back before the Planning Commission in a public hearing setting to discuss the resolution of some of the issues that were occurring at the site. The Planning Commission's decision to approve the minor use permit was appealed by Dave Ferrari on May 23rd. This appeal identified 5 issues as the basis for the appeal. They included the contention that there needed to be a minimum standard for operations for the motel. The issue here that's raised by the appellant is that the monies generated from the kayak concession are allowing the motel business to operate at a lower standard than would otherwise be financially feasible. The second item identified is the number of calls for service from the Sheriff's Department. Similar to the discussion at the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council and the Planning Commission, the concern here again is that the potential to put people in harm's way by drawing them to a site that has such a history with law enforcement. It's important to note that the Planning Commission did acknowledge this concern but dismissed it. In fact, one commissioner pointed out that none of the calls for service in the report occurred during the business hours of the kayak concession. The third item raised is that the negative impact of the Falcon Lodge has had on the appellant's business next door, the Crown Motel. This issue was also raised at the Planning Commission hearing. However, very little time was actually spent discussing the matter. All 4 of these issues were raised at the Planning Commission. None of these issues caused the Planning Commission to determine that the proposed use would be inappropriate, an inappropriate use of this particular property. The last remaining issue that is included in the appeal that staff has focused more attention on in the preparation of the staff report is the adequacy of the parking. Go to this. Got a couple of slides here. As I mentioned earlier about the Steamers property and the North Shore Parasail, there are 2 commercial properties in this area that provide parking for 3 commercial businesses. In your staff report on attachment D2 is the slide that's up before you right now. This is the Tahoe Paddle and Oar retail store location. This particular site contains 19 existing parking spaces, 5 of which are provided for the retail operation, the Tahoe Paddle and Oar. That's a requirement based on the square footage of the retail store. The North Shore Parasail property, which was approved with a previous minor use permit prior to the Tahoe Paddle and Oar, generated a need based on that entitlement of 11 parking spaces. All 11 of those parking spaces are provided for at this site on the north side of State Route 28. That brings us to 16 parking spaces. So there's 3 remaining parking spaces that can be dedicated to the Tahoe Paddle and Oar kayak recreation concession. The next slide is a close-up of the Falcon Lodge site. As I indicated, there's 20 motel rooms, 1 manager's unit, and 4 multifamily. This generates a need for 25 parking spaces. There's currently 32 parking spaces existing on this particular property. That brings us to the remaining 7 parking spaces that can be dedicated to the Tahoe Paddle and Oar recreation concession. So, in summary, I should just note for location, the kayak rack concession is located in the southeast corner right there of the property. So, in review of the adequacy of the parking provided for the variety of commercial properties, staff has determined that there's sufficient parking solely for the 20 kayaks that were originally approved with the 2004 permit, and that there is simply not sufficient parking within these properties to support the increase to the 40 kayaks. So, as detailed within the staff report, the Planning Commission has determined that the proposed project would be an appropriate use in the current location, and that by allowing this use, it would not contribute to the current issues at the Falcon Lodge. One commissioner in their discussion further concluded that the proposed project would in fact be a public safety benefit by not requiring folks to transport kayaks across State Route 28. So, in summary, because the appeal does not identify any new information that was not considered by the Planning Commission, with the exception of the discussion on parking, which we have addressed in our recommended conditions of approval, staff is recommending that the Board of Supervisors deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Planning Commission, subject to the findings and modified conditions of approval. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, should you have any.
Questions? Kirk.
Your original recommendation to the Planning Commission was to uphold the appeal and deny the request. Is that correct? Deny the use permit? That was staff's original recommendation.
That is correct.
And I don't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position, but I know that it is staff's duty essentially to carry forward the recommendation of the Planning Commission as staff's recommendation.
That is correct.
Absent the vote of the Planning Commission, would staff be here today recommending that we deny the appeal and that we award the use permit?
Based upon the information that was presented to the Planning Commission, staff still believes there are grounds to consider upholding the appeal and denying the use permit. But as you correctly stated, it's staff's responsibility to bring forward the recommendation for the Planning Commission, and we have done so.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Steve, there were a couple of things I just wanted to make sure I understood in your presentation. You referred to an early document that talked about adequate refuse collection. Was that specifically for the TPO permit, or was that for the Falcon Lodge?
That actually came about, the discussion on that, with the original appeal from the 2004 minor use permit. This was not a discussion based on the current request to modify the conditions.
But that was specific to Tahoe Paddle and Oar?
Actually, that was more specific to the surrounding recreation, outdoor recreation concessions. This was prior to the original approval by Tahoe Paddle and Oar, so they weren't in existence at the time.
And how do we define adequate refuse collection, and is it your characterization that we have that there? I'm sorry, that's probably a little subjective. But
And it's an issue that the Environmental Health Department looks at closely. They look at the number of persons that are utilizing an area and the number of waste containers that would be needed to accommodate that number of persons.
And so on site, and I'm just going to talk on site, I'm not going to talk one business versus the other. What is their, do they have a dumpster? What do they have for garbage collection there?
Right now, I believe, and correct me, is they just have standard garbage cans on site. I don't believe on the Falcon Lodge property that there is a dumpster available.
Okay, and I'll wait some more on that. The Tahoe Paddle and Oar permit right now is expired. Is that correct? Because it reached its sell-by date, and so they're looking to not extend a permit, but this would be a new permit at this point. Is that correct?
Actually, it would be the permit has expired, but the request that came in before the expiration of that permit was to modify that particular condition of approval that expired the permit, changing the date to an additional 5 years.
Okay. And I'm just asking some clarifying questions right now because I need to really understand this, because there's been, I'm sure everyone's seen all the back and forth and the emails and the phone calls and the everything, and I'm really trying to delineate the Falcon use versus the Tahoe Paddle-and-Oar use, and where those do have an intersection because they share the same piece of property in this case. Would upholding Mr. Ferrari's appeal in this case have any direct ramifications or impacts on the business use across the street, the storefront for Tahoe Paddle-and-Oar? Does it do anything to their operations across Highway 28?
No.
Okay. The 258 calls for service, was that for Placer County Sheriff's Office only, or does that include other public responses such as code enforcement or the fire department?
I believe it included other law enforcement, not necessarily code enforcement, but calls that came into the Sheriff's Department's dispatch.
So our assumption then is that 258 is for PCSO and fire, but not for county
That's correct.
response. Okay. Do we know, on the parking spaces, it sounds like there's a total of 10 that would be available. Is that what you're saying? 3 across the street at the Tahoe Paddle-and-Oar storefront, and then an additional 7 on the Falcon property?
That is correct.
So a total of 10, which would support 20 kayaks.
That's correct.
Okay. Do we know, and I don't know if this is something that we can even ask or if it's confidential business information, but do we know what the Falcon charges Tahoe Paddle-and-Oar for use of their property for this concession?
I don't have that information.
When the project proponents come up, I can ask them that. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks. I see no other questions from the board at this time, so I'll open it up to the public for comment, and I'll invite the appellant first to make their comments, and of course the applicant to the CUP can, or the minor use permit, excuse me, can make any comments they so choose also. Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe more.
Hey, my name is Dave Ferrari. I am the appellant on behalf of the Ferrari family. I thank you for taking the time today to hear this. I know it's a busy time of year and you're always very busy. A couple of things that have just come up on the top of that sheet is at least a 2005 statement that we received from Mr. Hodgson back in 2005 about the value of the kayak permit at that point. Now, whether that remains true today, I don't know. It could be, I guess, could be more, could be less. But I think that is something. Of the 258 police calls, just to sort of, I'll get back into that, but I believe it mostly just includes some fire assists, so probably 20 to 30 of those, or when maybe the fire was called and they came. So I think the list of fire calls were about 40. The health department was about 10, and those I don't think are typically in those police calls. So I have asked, because some of the comments that were just made, I also, Mr. Welna, I think he misstated what the Planning Commission said by a little bit in terms of the generation of the police calls that happened. Is they said that there were less calls during the day than at night. And so that was what the commissioner, I'm pretty sure, stated. He said he didn't say there were no calls during the day, because I'm sure the record does not show that. So I just want to point that out. And that kind of brings me to my first point. And I have asked my family some of my family members to come today, because I think in a certain way I felt, especially at the Planning Commission, that we as a family that's in business there, that our business and our family have been largely invisible in the process. So I'd like to This is my sister Mary. She works at the Crown right now. She and I both grew up at the Crown. We went K through 8 through Kings Beach Elementary. It took me a couple more years than Mary to get through there. But, my sister Marilyn, who lives at the Crown and helps me manage the place, and my oldest brother, retired Army Colonel, Corps of Engineers, Bob Ferrari. So I just want you to know, who we are. And I think what's interesting to me is when we talk about safety and we talk about that, well, most of those calls are at night, so it's okay. I mean, that's kind of what I felt at the Planning Commission. So I'm thinking, well, but we live there at night, and our guests are there at night. Do we don't count for that? So I think, I haven't done so well with the county, but I'm proud that we did get the we were approved or backed up by our local NITRAC, and that's our local people. And when they made their statements at that meeting, I think the most important one that was made there was from, well, two women that they said they put boots on the ground and they walked through the property and they actually saw it, and that's something I'm sure most of you haven't had time to do at this point. So I do have, some of you have seen what it looks like, at least from our side, and I have provided a few pictures that were taken in the last year. Look, I didn't bring them in today, but there's the code enforcement file on this property is 2 binders large, and it goes back to 2002. So it isn't like this is something that has just come up. And I think I've probably been remiss on behalf of my family for not being here sooner, not doing something sooner. Certainly it was the opinion of one of my guests last year that called me to his room, and he hadn't been in 3 years. And he said he made me look out the lakefront window and then made me look out the back window, which looks right at the Falcon Lodge. And he said, Dave, he said, this property looks worse than it did 3 years ago, and why haven't you done something about it, to me? Like, why? And I think that hit home pretty hard to me, as did the freedom of information and seeing what the actual police call list was, because we don't see that a lot. We don't actually see the parking lot and where most of the customers are, the Falcon, because we're right to the right of that picture. And you saw a letter from the Martindale family from Auburn. They actually own the camper shell business right down the street from here. And their room is right there next door, and they look at the building every time with the peeling paint and everything every time they walk up. It was a strong letter. You have it. I could have got hundreds of letters from our guests if I wanted, but I think some of that they might have just supported me, so I didn't try to do that. I do feel that that getting a minor use permit is a luxury. It is something extra that somebody gets on a property, and I do think there's got to be a minimum standard so that a property has to maintain. So I hope you can delve into today. And I don't know, I can't get the TOT information. I can tell you that we pay over $100,000 a year in TOT. We paid in the millions of dollars in our 56 years to Placer County over time. I don't know what I can't, it's not accessible to me, individual TOT information. I don't think there's ever been a workman's comp certificate with the property. I mean, there could be, but I don't know of any, paid like workman's comp type staff. I think there's no doubt in my mind, and that's what has really incentivized me to do this, is there's no doubt that this is affecting our business, that the condition of the property next to us and what's going on there is affecting our business. I think there's also the public safety issue. I think of the 258 calls, I think what's kind of more important in that are the nature of the calls. 9 noise, 2 assault with medical aid, 10 assaults, 14 disturbance physical fights, 10 domestic assaults, 2 drug activity, drunk in public 6, man down, whatever that is, 2, medical aid 16, probation searches 22, 5 thefts, 5 threats, 6 suspicious circumstances, 2 missing persons, 12 warrant arrests. So, that's one every 3 months there over 3 years. Welfare checks, fires, foot patrol 19. Not typical of a lodging operation, not typical calls, which tend to be noise and 911 calls. I think that also the basic, there's the basic just routine maintenance that should be done on a property that anybody would expect to be done on the property. I think, especially from our side of the property, it really is. I don't know. One of our guests described it as a crumb hole, but when you come into our main parking lot, new windows were installed. They were trimmed out simply with a piece of plywood. No trim around that. Never been a coat of paint in the 10 years put on there. So that the paint's peeling off that building. And the same thing on the back side. And you can see in the one picture what our guests look at when they, are staying in our most expensive rooms. And, the paint's peeling off, siding's falling off. I mean, it's a property that we had in escrow before it was bought by Mr. Hodgson. We did not buy it because we figured it would take $150,000 to put into it, and made an offer conditioned on that, and was not accepted. A higher price was paid, and here we are today. I think the garbage issue for us, especially as summer's coming, bears routinely visit the property, and if we don't lock our dumpster and put the chain on it, and now that winter's over, we'll actually put a lock back on it. We will. The bears are going to get in that. We have to make sure at the end of every night, late at night, we dump all our garbage cans. So when somebody's going to set garbage cans out on the street to be collected, it doesn't look that good, and the bears are going to feast on that. So it's interesting when Mr. Johnson was visiting the property to kind of take a look at it, that a tenant from the Falcon actually came out and threw garbage into our dumpster. So, that's. I think will they address the parking kayak issue? I appreciate you, the county planning, looking at that. Am I limited on this, or?
We're trying to.
Okay, I'm going to wind up here. Okay, I just, it's you guys know how long we've been around. I think we've been a good resident, good citizens of Placer County. I mean, we've provided swim lessons every year, not this year because we couldn't get the pools open. We do all the rooms for arts for the schools. We've helped tons of families in need and given them rooms if they need them, whatever. It's kind of like it's our house, and it's kind of like having a house with a bunch of rooms sometimes. We've been involved. I'm one of the founders of La Comunidad Unida, which is now the FRC, Boys and Girls Club, Sierra College. Those two things have put $52 million of infrastructure in Placer County or near enough and serving its residents. You guys are getting ready to spend $50 million. You'll see a letter in the packet I gave you from Economic and Planning Systems that describe the effect of the condition of this property on any ability we'd have to attract an investor or redevelop the property and have any chance of renting or selling units. I don't think we've asked a lot of Placer County over time, and I think we just always assumed that we'd have a safe place to live and a competitive advantage to do business, and I honestly don't think we have that today. I don't think we have either of those things. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm not going to read it. I think I've said enough, but I would urge you, I think at the back of your packet, but to read a TripAdvisor review on the Falcon Lodge written by one of their customers, but that talks about the loud music. At the end it says, you know, there's a couple of homeless people who attempt to break in, so make sure you have nothing of value. At one point, everyone else is under the influence of narcotics. I would recommend this place to someone who is able to sleep through loud noises and is able to never talk to the crazy neighbors. I mean, this is next door to us. This is next door to our business. I just urge you to read it if you have a minute, and I won't take any more of your time. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions of Mr. Ferrari? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Ferrari. If the Falcon Lodge was kept up to the conditions that you do at your establishment, you would have no problem with Tahoe Paddle and Oar using their facility as an additional use?
No, not at all. In fact, it was when we had it in escrow at that time, I think it was grossing $250,000. It was it's been a great place, and honestly, to further elaborate on what you're saying, the condition of a lot of the places in Kings Beach are getting pretty run down now. We're the last game. I think we're the last people that have staff, and it's hurting us. I'd rather have, it wouldn't be competition. I'd rather have Kings Beach be known as a place for nice lodging the way it was when we started the Crown and for probably the first 40 years of it. But slowly things have deteriorated, mostly because properties are old or hard. You got to work to maintain it. We've spent a lot. I mean, I had to bring 2 extra guys in to do the maintenance this spring because of all the different damage we had and just having to get it all going.
Jennifer.
This is not actually a question for Dave, but, well, it is a question. Is this a copy of some of the calls that the sheriff's reported?
Those are okay, I didn't mention that, but those are the calls that weren't included in the 258. Those are the calls since, I think it's February 1st.
Okay, and I'd like to point out on this, in that case, that the times are on here, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I identified right off the bat that did occur during regular daytime business hours. So my guess is if we looked at the other 258, your interpretation of what the Planning Commission said about most of them occurred at night, but some of them do occur during regular daytime business hours would be what we would discover if we actually looked at that.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
See no other questions. Thank you. Would the applicant or representative wish to address the board? You get equal time.
Thank you very much. My name is Phil Siegel. I'm the owner of Tahoe Paddle and Oar. Got a little bit of a cold, a little bit of pollen falling. And I'm here basically to answer any questions, but I'd like to say, first and foremost, our business has a very good working relationship with the Crown Motel, and I've known Dave Ferrari for 20 plus years, and we've never had a problem operationally. I think that, not to make it short or make light of it, I personally got the word from our community, and I immediately put together a plan with Fred Hodgson, the owner of the Falcon, to basically, we heard what the community said, and we want to be diligent, and we put together an improvement plan, that we would take the revenue generated from this minor use permit, the rental revenue, which, by the way, the rental operation, it's pretty much grosses $50,000. We employ 8 employees. We've had these same employees for the past 6 years that have worked as concessions. So this is 8 people that have not been able to get to work yet because of the appeal process. We provide an opportunity for the local community to paddle, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's the camps, Boy Scouts, whatever. We police that area. We haul our trash out of there. The issue, I think, the big factor of this is that there's something going on, and I feel the Ferrari's pain. I mean, I got that the first hearing that we went to, and I sincerely have put the energy into try and at least give us the year to see what we can do. We're not asking for a lifetime. If it gets down to 1 year, just see what we can do. There's a difference between the concession and you know, the motel. Obviously, that's the big issue. But with the minor use permit in place, we can take that revenue and start making improvements on that property, which I don't think there's going to be any improvements on that property unless there's some positive energy going that way. I don't want to lobby this. I'm just, you know, I can answer your questions if there are any.
Any questions? I don't see any at this time, but thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so now I will open it up to any members of the public who'd like to address the board, and you'll have 3 minutes, please.
Drove a long way. Good morning, everybody. Teresa Mae Duggan from beautiful Kings Beach. If Placer County awards a permit to rent kayaks, they will be rewarding the bad behavior of the neighbor, Falcon Lodge owner Fred Hodgen. Fred has not been a good neighbor, and he's costing each and every Placer County taxpayer and resident tens of thousands of dollars in service calls from Placer County Sheriff and numerous other county agencies. In 3 years since 2008, you've heard about the 258 calls to the Falcon. That's almost 1.5 a week. Some of the calls were up to 12 hours and included many other county agencies. This is unacceptable. I read the reports. The calls include dangerous behavior, assaults, drunk in public, probation searches, man down, numerous calls for drugs and or narcotic sales, prostitution, people threatened with weapons and firearms, requests to turn down the music being played at ear-splitting decibels. Over 220 hours of precious Placer County Sheriff's resources were spent at the Falcon Lodge, chasing down unsavory elements in Kings Beach. The Falcon Lodge used to be a great place to stay and visit. Years ago, the owners, the Smith family, kept the place sparkling with an inviting pool, clean rooms, and a spectacular beach. The outside was landscaped. Darrell Smith had quite a green thumb, and he had the place colorful with annual blooms. Since 2002, Fred has removed almost all of the landscaped areas rather than maintain or replant them. That's a shame. Rather than maintain the pool and make it ADA compliant, he filled it in, literally paving over paradise for a parking lot. Last year, one of the tenants moved his living space outside, complete with bed, stereo, plants, kitchen equipment. It looked every bit the Beverly Hillbillies. All of this was outdoor living in full view of the guests of the Crown Motel. If he indeed is running a motel and hospitality business, is he collecting and paying TOT? I think not. I've heard that he's filed as little as $50 a quarter. So again, he's stealing Placer County resources. TOT must be collected. It goes to the infrastructure that's desperately needed on the North Shore. He's written that he receives as much as $7,500 a month from the kayak business. So without those ill-gotten gains, he might not be able to continue to run his business. That might be a better outcome for Fred, for our community, and for Placer County resources. I embrace and accept diversity, but I cannot accept, nor will not embrace, willful disregard of the safety of residents and visitors. If I saw Fred doing the routine maintenance as required to run a hospitality business, I wouldn't be here today. He's shown over and over again that he is incapable of running a respectable operation. Would you live next to the Falcon Lodge? Would the Falcon Lodge flop house be tolerated in Auburn, in Rockland, or Lincoln? I think not. Just to wrap up, I can distinguish between the differences between neighbors. The Ferrari family and the Crown Motel have been in our community for over 55 years. They've run a business and raised a family right next door to the Falcon, always getting along with previous owners. Just fine. They've employed hundreds of people in our community, paying a living wage, contributing mightily to the community, and with the TOT funds, doing their fair share. They've hosted thousands of visitors and yet make time to offer their pools to local children so they can learn to swim in a safe place. They've been the example of the good neighbor. They continue to live next door, committed to welcoming more visitors to Lake Tahoe, but each day the Falcon is abusing the neighborhood. It gets increasingly difficult. So thanks to your vision To each and every one of you, we're about to invest $40 million in an improved pedestrian-friendly, bike-safe, visitor experience-enhancing downtown. We have a $35 million deed-restricted affordable housing development about to open in Kings Beach, providing warm, dry, dignified housing for all who apply and who qualify. There are alternatives to the Falcon. I predict their days are numbered. So please deny the permit and uphold the Ferrari family appeal. We must stop the madness. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. And I have one question of staff to kick it off. In the staff report, Michael, on page 5 of it's page 139 of the board packet, but page 5 of the staff report, under public nuisance, refers to issues related not to Tahoe Paddle and Oar, but to the Falcon Lodge, and it says the county, quote, is working to address the issues at Falcon Lodge property through other means. Are there code violations, and or can you tell me more explicitly some of the details with regards to what's going on?
There are some ongoing code violations that the county staff continues to look at, and we are currently addressing these code violations through our regular course of business as we would any other project site. Okay,
thanks. And then it's been a while since I've been on the Planning Commission, but we had, way back in the early 90s, a minute order that basically, unless there were compelling arguments to the contrary, essentially a policy that deferred considering additional entitlements during such time that there were code violations and until such time that those code violations were resolved. Is that essentially still the same practice?
Yes, it is.
Thanks. Jennifer.
Thank you. A couple of things that I really wanted to address here, which is want to really clarify, because again, back and forth in the emails and the phone calls and the personal contacts I've had with people just walking the streets of Kings Beach, is that what we're being asked to look at today is the appeal on the Tahoe Paddle and Oar. And what is the intersection between Tahoe Paddle and Oar's operations on this property and the other things that are going on at the Falcon Lodge? Because they do share the same parcel, in this case, to run two separate businesses. So the question that was posed to me is, is it good public policy for the County of Placer to allow one use on a shared property that's enabling a set of other uses that we wouldn't support as a county? And someone compared it, I want to make sure I get the term right. Someone said, it's like you're enabling a codependent relationship here. And when I look at the letter from Fred to Dave, where Fred says they're making $7,500 monthly on this, that's 22. I mean, let's say it's a 3-month season. That's $22,500 for this month, for the year. I'm sorry, 5 years. It's $112,000, over $112,000. And the argument is that this money is necessary to improve the Falcon. Well, I have to say that I've been in the area for 23 years and I haven't seen any improvement. And so while the Planning Commission, may have held that by denying the permit would not improve the Falcon Lodge, I would have to say that approving the permit seems to have not improved the Falcon Lodge either to this point in time. Now, to be fair, Fred did send me and Steve Caston an email saying that he would be willing to put $4,000 a year to maintenance and improvements on the Falcon property. I spend more than that on my home a year up where I live, and so I'm just concerned that that this intersection that does occur between the two businesses sharing the property is resulting in a really negative outcome for the community. And I think we're policymakers here, as well as implementers of rules, laws, regulations. So I think that's something that we really need to think about. Are we enabling a codependent relationship here? I think additionally, while these calls are not specific to Tahoe Paddle and Oar, the fire and sheriff's calls are not specific to Tahoe Paddle and Oar. Tahoe Paddle and Oar, does not actually have an unblemished record themselves. I was out there last summer just doing a drive through Kings Beach, as I always do, and drove through the area, and there were more than 20 boats in the racks and on the ground next to the racks there. They're permitted for 20, so they were in violation of their permit last summer. Now, I don't call in code enforcement. That's not my job. It's not appropriate for county staff to do that. That's why it's a complaint driven from the public process. But I personally witnessed 26 boats there. I counted them because I thought, well, that looks like more than 20. Greg, could you, or Jeremy, could you pull up the pictures I took just last week? And it's only one slide. Bear with me. It's a really short PowerPoint. It's the lake. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. See the clarity? Okay, so it's my understanding that during this process, this appeal process, Tahoe Paddle and Oar was informed that they were not to have any boats on the facility. And yet last Wednesday I happened to be doing a ride-along with the sheriff's office up there and took these pictures. Those are two different racks, by the way. So, as I say, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that they were told very clearly they were not to have any boats there until this issue was resolved.
That is correct.
Okay, so, as I say, that I'm concerned because Tahoe Paddle and Oar, at least twice that I have personally witnessed, has been in violation of either their permit or the embargo on the use because the permit was not in place. My question is, do we want to really add one more set of problems to a property that is already plagued with a number of problems? If we uphold the appeal today, which I will recommend that we do uphold the appeal, it still allows Tahoe Paddle and Oar to operate across the street. They have a storefront. They have appropriate parking for that storefront. They have a business model that has worked in the past and will continue to work. But based on what I've heard from the community up there, I just cannot recommend to this board that we allow the permit, and I would suggest that we uphold Mr. Ferrari's appeal.
Jim. Jim, Tony turned on his light, so sometimes, county council has some key words of wisdom for us, so perhaps we should.
So, the staff report does not have findings to support the conclusion, because the way the staff report is written to support the decision of the Planning Commission. But if the board turns to page 156 and 157 of the staff report, you'll see the original recommendation of staff to the Planning Commission, which does have findings that support a denial of the use permit. And those would be framed for the basis for such a motion that I just heard made, with the slight exception that obviously on page 157 in bullet 3, instead of referring to the Planning Commission, we would be referring to the Board of Supervisors in that reference.
Thanks, Tony. Jim.
I just want to kind of echo the concerns raised by my colleague from the 5th District. The Falcon Lodge for almost 10 years has had this pattern of behavior of not taking care of their property in a way that should be expected. And I don't know why I would allow an additional use unless that property was cleaned up and presented as the Crown Motel is. So I have to support Supervisor Montgomery's that we grant the appeal and deny the municipal use permit.
That's the second.
Okay, and did you make a motion? Was that a motion?
Yeah, and I guess my motion should include the findings on page 157 with the change in bullet 3 that Planning Commission should be replaced with Board of Supervisors. Is that appropriate, Tony?
And also recommend the comment with regards to the CEQA compliance on page, at the bottom of page 156.
Yes.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the appeal, deny the minor use permit as per the discussion, and specifically the CEQA compliance as discussed on page 156 of the board packet, and the findings on page 157 of the board packet, changing out the Planning Commission title with Board of Supervisors. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
If I may, Robert, just very briefly, I would be more than happy to work with you to try to find an alternative site for this summer, because I think I don't have an objection to Tahoe Paddle and Oar. I really don't. I love being out on the lake myself. So I would love to work with you to try to find some place for you to stage your business. The other thing is, Michael, and this is, I think, probably directed at you, in the process of getting all the input on this, I received a number of emails from people indicating that there appear to be some uses at the Falcon Lodge that are not allowed. It appears that they're basically functioning as an emergency shelter, according to some of the emails that were sent to us. It's my understanding that is not a permitted use with their current license and permit. Can you just look into that and see what the upshot of that is, please?
I will. Staff received that email yesterday, and we are pursuing that and looking into the issue.
Thank you. It just caught my attention.
Okay, thank you. And so now we will adjourn back into closed session concurrent with lunch. So, Tony?
We will return and take up the balance of the material as previously discussed but not completed.